Chapter 1507. This force is much stronger than mine. If I go near it recklessly, will I be devoured by it? The Dharma Supreme's cultivation was much higher than Yizue's. The first thing that came to his mind was not an opportunity but a crisis. Then he thought, if I get my hands on this force, who will I be afraid of in this world? Even if Wu Jueqing and Ning Tianya join forces, what do I have to fear? Even if that terrifying person comes again, I will still have a chance to deal with him. After a while, the darkness retreated completely. But in the eyes of the Dharma Supreme, he could clearly see a faint wisp of black aura moving rapidly toward the south in the sky. The Dharma Supreme frowned. In the end, he still decided to catch up and take a look. At the same time, he touched the heaven-nourishing jade in his chest. He thought to himself, even if it is harmful, I still have the heaven-nourishing jade that counters dark demonic aura. It shouldn't be difficult to get away. With this thought, he floated up. The next moment, he had already spread out his unique divine cognition and found the two figures. After giving a few instructions, he became a ball of black fog and disappeared without a trace. With a swoosh. The battle formation had been fully set up. Today was already the evening of the first day. Mo Tianji had already recovered part of his spirit. Previously, he had tried his best to calculate the heavenly secrets, causing his body to become extremely weak. In addition, there was another extremely troublesome matter. This unexpected change made Mo Tianji's situation even worse. After eating an incomplete version of the heavy pill, his body recovered. But even so, the great trickster's brows were still tightly knitted and never relaxed again. Elderly, after today's battle, the Li clan will be gone. Mo Tianji said solemnly. Right now, the two of them were not talking alone but in the main hall of the Li clan, in front of all the high-level supreme martial artists of the Li clan. Mo Tianji did not use telepathy but just said it clearly. The current situation was already clear. No matter how much comforting words such as maybe or maybe were, it was meaningless. Mo Tianji might as well use the most direct method to explain the current situation and break the ice. Li Chunhua's expression was calm. He said solemnly, indeed, the Li clan has already lost almost everything. The outcome is already set. Back then, this old man carried out my father's wishes and established the Li clan in a situation where I had almost nothing. I created this foundation that has been passed down for 10,000 years. However, I never dreamed that the Li clan that was established in my hands would also be destroyed by me in the end. But now that things have come to this, no matter how much I feel, it's useless. It's just that I really didn't expect that the Li clan would be destroyed by the hands of its closest brother. It's hard to distinguish between kindness and righteousness. Li Chunhua smiled lightly. Although there is always a reason behind everything, now that things have come to this, there's nothing more to say. Just take it as repayment for the sins that the Li clan has committed all these years. We'll use the entire Li clan to repay them completely. Li Chunhua chuckled. Senior is magnanimous. Mo Tianji sincerely praised. Then he smiled bitterly and said, the outcome is already unavoidable. But we still have to face it. I will do my best to make the invaders pay the heaviest price. Mo Tianji insipidly said, tonight, let's take our positions. The battle of life and death is right in front of us. Everyone, if there's anything that needs to be said or done, you must finish everything before tonight. Once the time is up, there won't be any more chances. We've already made preparations long ago. We don't have any more worries. We can only do our best to kill the enemy. Everyone shouted in unison. We've killed a lot of people. We've killed a lot of enemies and innocent people. We've also done a lot of outrageous things. If we can drag a few people down with us when we're about to die, it'll be worth it. That's right. We're already doomed. Then what's the point of being reluctant? Killing to our heart's content is the most important thing. Mo Tianji nodded. He thought to himself, if the various signs earlier are really the omens of the extraterrestrial demon's descent, then it's important that we end the war here as soon as possible. No matter what, the big clans will have to suffer great losses in this war. As for the future developments, there's really no way to predict it now. That night, Li Chuanbua stood alone at the top of the mountain. His peak second-level supreme martial artist divine cognition spread out without any reservation and shot straight into the sky. As the divine cognition spread out, the falling snow in the sky was actually completely driven out by his will. An extremely powerful force stirred up the weather just like that. Everyone present could clearly see that the wind and snow in the sky could no longer invade Li Chuanbua's surroundings. The area that they couldn't invade gradually expanded as though there was no limit at all. In the end, even the clouds and mist in the sky were neatly separated by the divine cognition. Slowly shifting to the sides, it was as though two large hands were slowly pushing the clouds and mist apart, revealing the clear blue sky in the northwest that hadn't been completely revealed for hundreds of thousands of years. Everyone from the Li clan below couldn't help but raise their heads and stare at this newly revealed starry sky in a daze. They were witnessing this huge miracle of using human strength to drive away the wind and snow, push away the clouds and mist, and see the starry sky. The night was deep. The starry sky was as vast as the sea, as though it contained countless secrets. The northwest starry sky that was shrouded in wind and snow all year round. At this moment, heaven and earth were clear and transparent, and the universe was clear and bright. Perhaps this was the only time they would ever see it in their entire lives. Tears suddenly streamed down someone's face, choking up so much that he couldn't speak anymore. Li Chuanbua's expression was unusually solemn, filled with a touch of pilgrimage. The Northwest, the Li clan has been entrenched here for more than 10,000 years, yet our grandchildren have never seen the true appearance of the starry sky. Tonight, at this moment, since the clan has already reached the end of its existence, then let us return to silence under the starry sky that we have never seen before. For this, even if I exhaust all my cultivation, what harm is there in that? In the distance, on top of a tall mountain, the founding ancestor of the Shao clan, Shao Chenyu, stood quietly with his hands behind his back. He raised his head and looked at the abnormal phenomenon in the sky. The clouds and mist in the sky were moving abnormally, and he let out a long and deep sigh. Suddenly, he understood Li Chuanbua's intention. Do you want to die in battle under the starry sky? I'll fulfill your wish. I'll definitely fulfill your wish. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, his white robes fluttered even though there was no wind. A similar peak-grade supreme martial artist aura soared into the sky, instantly winding through the sky. He was actually using his endless cultivation to continue moving the clouds and mist, moving them endlessly away from his side. The moment he made his move, Li Chuanbua immediately sensed it. His eyes flickered, but he didn't make any response in the end. He only immediately withdrew the power in that direction and turned to push the clouds on the other side with all his might, continuing to push them in the opposite direction. The area of the starry sky became wider and wider. In the end, the direction of the clouds and mist gradually became inertia. Although the two of them had already stopped and withdrawn their astonishing cultivation, the clouds and mist in midair still rolled and rolled away to both sides. On this day and this night, in the northwest horizon, there was no wind, no snow, no clouds, and no mist. The blue sky was clear and bright. Not a speck of dust could be seen. The northwest sky, which had been covered by wind, snow, and clouds for hundreds of thousands of years, revealed its original appearance of endless magnificence for the first time. Such stars, such a night, such a massacre, such emotions. The sky that was originally covered was now even clearer and cleaner than other places. The starlight also seemed to shine even more brightly. Suddenly, two long howls soared into the sky, accompanied by the different emotions of their owners. Li Chuanbua stood alone on the peak and howled into the sky. His howl was like a dragon, stretching across the vast sky. However, it carried with it endless longing and endless bitterness. Father, you have already been missing for 10,000 years, a whole 10,000 years, but I don't know if you are still around. If you are still around, which part of this starry sky would you be at? Would you be overlooking the earth and watching the common people? Would you know that our Li clan will decline tonight? On this night, the two supreme martial artists stood on their respective peaks just like that, not moving at all. Even though their cultivation was top-notch and distance didn't exist between them, they still didn't look at each other. However, they also seemed to be accompanying each other. On the morning of the 10th day, the decisive battle was about to arrive. Mo Tianji appeared on one of the tallest peaks near the battlefield. By his side, Ao Shiyun and Rui Badong were actually missing, which was rare. There were only Chu Lu, Wan Renjie, Cheng Duiying and Bao Buhuan. However, accompanying and protecting him was Chu Lu's request. As Ao Shiyun and Rui Badong were bent on participating in the battle, Chu Lu volunteered to be their bodyguard. Reaching the peak and facing the vast earth and vast sky, Chu Lu couldn't help but feel very carefree. An inexplicable feeling rose in her heart. No wonder so many men want to reach the peak. It turns out that this feeling is really good, really good. Although I am a woman, I also want to stand at the peak of the world like today. How do you feel? Not bad, right? Mo Tianji asked with a smile. Very good. Really very good. Chu Lu's pretty eyes sparkled. One day, we will stand at the true peak. Mo Tianji smiled warmly. Although this is the peak, it is only the peak within the range of the heavens. The peak today is just the beginning for us. That's all. I know that you are talking about the true peak, the legendary heavenly imperial court. Chu Lu smiled and said, I also want to go up there. The most important thing is that I also want to stand at the true peak. Chu Lu suddenly laughed crisply and shouted, I will definitely go up there. I will definitely go up there. Her crisp and tender voice traveled far and wide, reverberating in the air for a long time. Several patches of snow on the nearby mountain peaks were shaken off, making a loud rumbling sound. Everyone on the battlefield looked up at the same time, searching for the owner of the voice. Why is she on the battlefield? What is she doing here? In the distance, Wu Jueqing was a little anxious. Why is this little girl not listening to me and running around? Is this a fun place? Chu Yang was also a little surprised. Why is Lur here? Wu Jueqing frowned. In the end, he was still worried. He said, I have to go and warn them. Don't let this bunch of bastards implicate my disciple. Weapons have no eyes. It's better to take precautions beforehand. Before Chu Yang could say anything, Wu Jueqing had already descended the snowy peak with his white robes fluttering in the wind. Now that both sides were facing a great enemy and on the verge of fighting, Wu Jueqing actually went down to warn both sides. Chapter 1508. Chu Yang couldn't help but feel a little speechless. Big brother, a great battle is about to begin here. You're not even participating, yet you're interfering with other people's decisions. However, Minister Chu was still in full agreement with Wu Jueqing's decision. Who asked the beneficiary to be my younger sister? Diwu Qingru. On the top of the mountain, Mo Tianji raised his voice and shouted. His voice rang out. On the opposite side, on a similarly highest peak, Diwu Qingru sat upright. Beside him were only Lan Mofeng and a few others. The two supreme commanders naturally had a tacit understanding. This battle was the moment to determine the true victor between the two of them, regardless of whether it was inside or outside the game. Mo Tianji. Diwu Qingru smiled. Today, we'll settle this with a battle. Mo Tianji's clear voice reverberated in the air. No regrets in life or death, no regrets in victory or defeat. Diwu Qingru smiled and said, That's right. No regrets in life or death, no regrets in victory or defeat. Although Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru were very far away and couldn't really see each other, they could still hear each other's words clearly. The sound transmissions from supreme martial artist level experts traveled exceptionally far in the silent and relatively empty sky. The moment they realized that they were standing on opposite peaks, there was a smile in their eyes. That was a smile of knowing each other's hearts and understanding. It was indeed so. A well-matched opponent was, in another sense, a confidant. The pride of a military advisor of a generation and the conceit of a legendary tactician made the two of them choose to confront each other head-on in this final battle. A head-on confrontation, deployment of troops, battle formations against the enemy, to determine the victor. With a dignified army, with a righteous flag, with a mighty and magnificent overt scheme, to completely defeat the other party. Only a head-on deployment of troops and battle formations was the true standard of a legendary tactician. Schemes and tricks, winning by surprise, could ultimately only be used in coincidental moments. Moreover, devious and unusual schemes would also give the other party a lot of unnecessary buffer time. As the saying went, speed is the most important thing in war. In such a head-on deployment of troops and battle formations, one mistake would result in the loss of the entire game. Once a move was lost, it would be difficult to recover. Even if the losing party reacted later, it would still be a beat too late. And this slap would often determine the outcome of the battle. Therefore, to predict the direction of the battle and make timely responses, there must not be any mistakes. Any miscalculation could lead to an irreversible failure. If they didn't deal with it properly, it would easily lead to many casualties. Countless lives would disappear before their eyes. The two strategists simultaneously launched the cruelest way of fighting for the strategists. At present, the strength of both sides was not very balanced, and the allied forces held too much of an advantage. On the side of the 8 great clans and the law enforcement officer coalition army, there was 1 peak-grade supreme martial artist, 8 middle-grade supreme martial artists, 48th grade supreme martial artists, 10 7th-grade supreme martial artists, more than 200 middle-grade supreme martial artists, and more than 1,000 supreme martial artists of various levels. There were also 15,000 saint-level experts. As for the Li clan side, Jianghu had 1 high-grade supreme martial artist and 3 low-grade supreme martial artists. The friends whom Li Chuanbo had relied on the most in his life had also appeared in this battle. The life and death divine blade Chu Jianghu, who was known as the Life Guarantee, also came out at the last moment and appeared. Chu Jianghu was a middle-stage supreme martial artist and Li Chuanbo's sworn brother. He was known as the Divine Saber of Life and Death, and was a rare saber supreme in the level Heavens continent. He was also Li Chuanbo's last and greatest trump card. Other than that, there were 8 8th-grade supreme martial artists, 17 7th-grade supreme martial artists, and 25 middle-grade supreme martial artists. There were 10 5th-grade supreme martial artists, and another 10 supreme martial artists below them. There were a total of 1,000 5th-grade martial artists and above. Even if Mo Tianji, Ao Shiyun, and a few others were included, the overall strength assessment was just a drop in the bucket. It was difficult to affect the balance of the overall situation. In terms of the actual strength of both sides, the difference was calculated by 10 times. Therefore, what Diwu Qingru wanted was complete victory. With such an advantage, if he still couldn't achieve complete victory in the end, it would be equivalent to Diwu Qingru losing to Mo Tianji. Diwu Qingru's bottom line was to lose 20% of his strength in exchange for the complete destruction of the Li clan. And Mo Tianji's standard was to cause unlimited damage to the enemy with the limited military strength they had now. At the very least, they had to cause more than 30% damage to the enemy. This was the goal that Mo Tianji had set for himself. In a situation where one's strength was obvious, to cause such damage with a weak military strength was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. No, what was so difficult about ascending to the heavens? As long as one was a 2nd-grade supreme martial artist, he or she would have the ability to do so. Therefore, the difficulty should be comparable to breaking through the void. The final outcome of the battle had long been decided. There would be no accidents with the eventual destruction of the Li clan. So much so that both sides wouldn't deliberately care about that anymore. The only thing that was worth paying attention to was the performance of both sides in this battle. The bleak sound of the bugle horn suddenly rang out. It reverberated in this vast expanse of heaven and earth. Fight! More than 10,000 people from both sides roared at the same time. This wasn't the roar of an ordinary person. Any one of these people participating in the battle was a well-known expert outside. In the lower 3 heavens, they were all characters who could be called kings or ancestors. How rich was their Dantianqi? Tens of thousands of people from both sides roared at the same time. Apart from being spectacular, there was also endless power. It actually caused hundreds of mountains in the surroundings to collapse at the same time. However, the earth-shattering commotion caused by that kind of natural power was as insignificant as silence in front of the roars of tens of thousands of people. Kill! Another loud roar rang out. The accumulated snow within a radius of thousands of miles was shaken to the point that it jumped up one after another. Vertical lines of snow dust appeared on the ground. However, it was as if countless silver dragons were dancing under the firmament. A ray of sunlight suddenly rose, and tens of thousands of golden rays illuminated the earth. A clear starry sky appeared in the northwest last night. This morning, they bathed in the first time in hundreds of thousands of years that the sun shone on everything. On the Li clan side, they were similarly seething with excitement. Thump, thump, thump. On Diwu Qingrou's side, hundreds of heavy drums slowly and dully rang out. The army moved forward in an orderly manner. The final battle was about to begin. It could happen at any moment. Cough, cough. Wait a minute, I have something to say. Right at this moment, a very clear and bright voice suddenly rang out. The voice didn't seem very loud, but just this one sentence suppressed the roars of tens of thousands of people in one fell swoop. Who was the newcomer? He actually had such a profound cultivation. Xiao Qinyu was originally sitting on the back of a snow-white snow lion with his eyes narrowed, using it as a means of transportation. He didn't care about anything that was happening around him and was only waiting for the battle with Li Chuanbua. He was actually looking forward to the arrival of this battle very much, but he also hoped that this battle could come a little later. His feelings could be said to be extremely contradictory. But this sudden sentence was like a demonic voice that penetrated his brain, directly piercing into his ears. Xiao Qinyu opened his eyes abruptly and looked toward the direction of the voice. Under everyone's gaze, a white-robed figure slowly floated down from the sky above the battlefield. When he reached a height of 180 feet, he stopped and stood quietly in the void. The newcomer lowered his head slightly and looked indifferently at the allied forces in front of him. An invisible pressure came crashing down from above. Xiao Qinyu suddenly felt as if his chest was suddenly pressed down by a huge rock. He actually felt a little breathless and suffocated. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright. With Xiao Qinyu's cultivation, even if a rock weighing a few hundred kilograms or a few thousand kilograms really pressed down on his chest, he might not feel suffocated. But at this moment he really had such a feeling. When he saw Wu Jueqing's face clearly, his heart was even more shocked. Although he had never met him in person, Wu Jueqing's portrait was something that every big clan had. Because he was an existence that absolutely couldn't be provoked. An existence that was even more terrifying than Ning Tianya, Bu Luqing and the Feng and Yu couple. Poison Dr. Wu Jueqing, who could poison thousands of miles. Xiao Qinyu floated up. He actually didn't soar into the sky but walked over step by step. He walked out of the group and bowed respectfully. To think that Elder Wu would actually grace us with his presence. Qinyu was very apologetic for not going out to meet you. Please forgive me. Xiao Qinyu's attitude caused an uproar among the allied forces. Who was Xiao Qinyu? The first-generation elder master of the Xiao clan, a peak-grade supreme martial artist, and the #1 expert of the allied forces. When had he ever been so submissive to anyone? However, the person before him had accomplished this feat by merely showing himself. From the beginning to the end, he just showed up and said one sentence. Who exactly was this person? There was even a look of heartfelt shock in the eyes of some people. From Xiao Qinyu's words, they could determine who the person in front of them was. They couldn't help but be shocked and see stars. An indescribable feeling of helplessness welled up in them. Could it be that in today's battle, they actually had to fight with this legendary killing star? Wasn't that courting death? As for the people of the Qin clan who had fought with Wu Jueqing back then, their faces were even more ashen. There weren't many of them left now. But as long as they still existed, how could they not recognize Wu Jueqing? Now that they saw Wu Jueqing again, how could they not remember how Wu Jueqing didn't really make a move back then and left a ground full of corpses as he talked and laughed? Would Wu Jueqing's sudden appearance affect today's battle situation? Because this legendary figure had the ability to change the entire situation. Other than having the strength of a peak-grade supreme martial artist, Wu Jueqing was also the poison doctor. If he participated in this battle, he might really change the battle situation. Even if the Allied forces could still win in the end, they would definitely have to pay an extremely heavy price. Wu Jueqing stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He said, "Xiao Chenyu, so you're the one in charge here." Xiao Chenyu was a little disdainful. He thought to himself, who would believe that you don't know that I'm here? To think that you're pretending not to know. He said respectfully, "Yes, I'm the one in charge here." At this moment, the leaders of the other clans also came over to pay their respects. Wu Jueqing nodded slowly. "I'm not here for battle." Wu Jueqing said calmly, "I'm here for a personal matter. I'd like to make a request to all of you." The moment Wu Jueqing said this, the higher-ups of the Allied forces were elated. Luckily, this terrible old monster wasn't the Li clan's reinforcements. If he was, would we be able to take him down if half of our experts were not dead? Chapter 1509. Otherwise, why would he say that Xiao Chenyu was the clan head of the Xiao clan? His words were cleverly said, not only putting Wu Jueqing on a pedestal, but also ensuring that he would not participate in the battle. Not to mention that Wu Jueqing was definitely not the Li clan's helper. Even if he was, he would be too embarrassed to say it now. "Don't talk nonsense, I won't fall for it. If I'm really here to help the Li clan, no matter how beautiful your words are, I will still take action. Let's get down to business. I'm only here to say one thing." "I want to say something seriously," said Wu Jueqing indifferently. He turned around and pointed. "Do you see that? That little girl over there is my disciple." Xiao Chenyu raised his eyes and took a look. Instantly, his face turned bitter. At such a distance, even a peak-level supreme martial artist wouldn't be able to see anything. He didn't know what Wu Jueqing was pointing at, but there was no doubt that he was pointing at the Li clan. "That is my only disciple, Chu Lu." Wu Jueqing said indifferently, "She is there now. I don't wish for her to be harmed by anyone. That's all." Everyone was speechless. That was the enemy's command center, the absolute core area. Now it had become a restricted area? They couldn't move anymore? And that's all. What kind of words were these? What kind of situation was this? There was already a strategy in the previous battle plan. When everyone wanted to join the battle, they would gather the most elite experts to execute a decapitation operation to eliminate the Li clan's high-end combat power. Now that Wu Jueqing said this, wasn't it obvious that he was biased? But if they didn't agree? They didn't dare to? Even a peak-level supreme martial artist like Xiao Chenyu didn't dare to. Seeing that no one agreed, Wu Jueqing was a little angry. His voice became a little colder. "That is my disciple, my only disciple. Do you all understand?" His tone was close to berating. Everyone only felt a lump in their chest, almost unable to breathe. But facing Wu Jueqing, facing the poison doctor, who dared to say no? If the Allied forces didn't hesitate to fight, they indeed had the ability to kill Wu Jueqing. But at least 80% of the people present, or even more, would be wiped out. And it was only a possibility. The results of the battle belonged to everyone, but their lives belonged to them. Against Wu Jueqing, there was the possibility of being consigned to eternal damnation at every turn. Whoever was willing to take the lead, whoever took the lead would be done for first. Xiao Chenyu pondered for a moment before replying respectfully, "We naturally wouldn't dare to offend Senior Wu's beloved disciple. But now that the two sides are at war, it's inevitable that your beloved disciple won't be taken care of properly. Senior Wu, since you don't intend to participate in the war, why don't you take your beloved disciple away from the battlefield? That way, you can have the best of both worlds." He thought to himself, Wu Jueqing is the god of plagues, so his disciple must also be the god of plagues. Even if she's just a little girl, her use of poison is equally terrifying. If he could send these two demons away, he would be able to avoid a lot of losses. Wu Jueqing rolled his eyes. "What are you talking about? My disciple is still young, and accompanying an old man like me every day isn't very interesting. I'm also old and I don't understand what this little girl likes to do. Now that she's finally found something fun to do, how can I interrupt my disciple's fun?" Xiao Chenyu's mouth was agape. Looking at Wu Jueqing, he almost couldn't believe his own ears. He couldn't help but feel dizzy. Play? Something fun to do? Don't interrupt your disciples' fun? These words were really too powerful. To be able to say such a thing, it was truly too strange. This is a battle of life and death between both sides. You guys are here to play? Your disciple is playing with the lives of tens of thousands of people on our side, and you actually want us to play with her? We can't hurt her? What the heck? Xiao Qinyu's face was bitter. He said, "We naturally don't dare to offend your disciple. But if your disciple attacks our people first..." Wu Jueqing was furious at once. How can I care so much? It's her freedom to attack whoever she wants. Can I restrict my disciple's freedom? But if others attack her, it's a provocation to me, Wu Jueqing. I will never forgive them. Xiao Qinyu and the high-level supreme martial artists of the various clans almost fainted. What was he saying? Was there anything more pompous, shameless, and unreasonable than this sentence in the world? I know you're protective of your disciple, but you can't be so protective. You've really become the role model of the heavens. Only your disciple is allowed to attack others, and that's actually her. Freedom? This freedom really makes one speechless. And the counterattack of others is actually a provocation to you? Then if your disciple attacks us, can we only wait with our necks stretched out? If your disciple actually thinks that it's dirty, then shouldn't we wash our necks clean before being slaughtered? Instantly, resentment filled the air. One of them couldn't help but say, "Elder Wu, isn't this a little unreasonable?" Wu Jueqing rolled his eyes and laughed strangely. Unreasonable? Have you heard? When have I, Wu Jueqing, ever been reasonable? Suddenly, he took a step forward and said with a smile, "What is reasonable? Come, explain it to me." That person was so scared that he kept retreating. He said repeatedly, Yes. Elder Wu's words are reasonable. Everyone felt aggrieved. For a moment, they even felt like cutting their own throats. Wu Jueqing took in all their reactions. He let out a cold laugh and said, "You're right. Staying in this world is the truth. Let me reiterate again, I will not participate in your battle. This kind of worldly battle formation is indeed completely meaningless to me. However, if my disciple is injured because of this, then, no matter which clan he is injured in, there is no need for that clan to exist anymore." Everyone cursed in their hearts. Motherfucker, you've already stepped forward to take sides, and you still have the cheek to say that you won't participate. If you're not participating, then what are you doing here? Are you here to do some freaking performance art? No matter how nasty the curses were in their hearts, no one dared to make a sound. At this point, whoever made a sound would be the unlucky one. Everyone could tell that Wu Jueqing was a little angry. His eyes also had some malicious intentions, as if he was looking for someone to show his power to, who would be willing to step forward and be this chicken to warn others. Even if their heads were kicked by a donkey, they wouldn't step forward. Wu Jueqing smiled and said, "Xiao Qinyu, do you think I can do it?" Xiao Qinyu's complexion turned purple. He took 2 deep breaths and forcefully suppressed his anger. Senior's divine might is unparalleled. Destroying a mere clan by yourself is naturally as easy as flipping your hand. Wu Jueqing laughed and said, "Well said. My request is that simple. Since that's the case, I'm relieved. Everyone fight as you should. Just don't make any mistakes. I'll take my leave now." Then he actually smiled. That little girl is actually here to play. If you let her play happily, won't everyone be happy? Her name is of course, has to be happy. His white figure soared into the sky with a whoosh. With a turn in the air, he disappeared without a trace. Only then did everyone feel the huge pressure on them disappear instantly. They all let out a sigh of relief. Did everyone hear that? Xiao Qinyu said with a dark face, "No one is allowed to touch that little girl. Don't make any mistakes. And don't make any mistakes." Everyone felt so wronged that they wanted to die. Motherfucker, what is this? You already told us not to make any mistakes, and you still want us to fight as we should? How else can we fight? Motherfucker. Who the hell wants to touch that little girl? We want to touch the people around her, that master of calculation and manipulation, Mo Tianji. Now, if we touch Mo Tianji, that little girl definitely won't let us. If we touch that little girl, Wu Jueqing will definitely not let us, and the consequence will be that our entire clan will be destroyed. But if we don't move, are we just going to watch that little girl calmly command us? And we're even responsible for letting her play happily. Won't everyone be happy? How could you say something like that? If we don't all die, will your disciple be happy? If we want to let her play happily, then we'll all commit mass suicide. Should we be happy just because her name is Le? Then if I change my name to Exterminating the World, won't I really exterminate the world? Damn it. In all the wars that we've fought, we've never fought with such grievances. Yi Xiaoyao said, Elder Xiao is right. Everyone, don't make any mistakes. Whoever wants to touch her can do it. Anyway, the Yi clan won't touch her. Everyone rolled their eyes. Motherfucker! Xiao Chenyu cursed angrily and turned around. Everyone hung their heads dejectedly. They felt as if they had eaten feces. The imposing aura and high fighting spirit just now were actually reduced by half. On the contrary, the aura of the other side was like a tsunami. The sound of killing was earth-shattering. Everyone's blood was boiling. The battle was about to begin. At this moment, both sides that were about to fight to the death were silent. Diwu Qingru looked at the vast plains in front of him and was really puzzled. On such a flat terrain, what exactly did Mo Tianji rely on to be so confident and sure of dealing with him? The main battlefield of the two sides was surrounded by mountains. Only the boundary of the heart was unusually vast and empty, like a plain. This was a little strange. Battles that took place on such a battlefield were usually only suitable for frontal assaults, and not for any kind of strategy or layout. No matter how ingenious one's improvisation was, in such a vast plain, one would lose most of the opportunities. Because no matter what changes one made, in such an environment where there was almost no concealment, the other side would definitely see it at the first moment. As long as there was no fundamental error in judgment, it would not affect the outcome of the battle. And with Diwu Qingru's wisdom, it was absolutely impossible for him to make a fundamental error in judgment. In other words, Mo Tianji had chosen this place for the decisive battle. And this was tantamount to fixing himself in a position where he was bound to lose. There was such a huge disparity in strength between the two sides. Yet, they still chose to fight head-on without taking advantage of the terrain advantage. Wasn't it puzzling? Bookhouse. 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 Mo Tianji didn't look like someone who would commit suicide. Further north of the plains was a continuous stretch of mountains. This was the location of the final battle that Diwu Qingru had predicted. Chapter 1510. The Li clan, as the host, had the advantage of being familiar with the terrain. Wouldn't they be able to unleash their strength better? Taking advantage of the situation and defeating the enemy was the right way to go. Not only Diwu Qingru, but even Chu Yang, Tan Tan and the others also fixed their gazes on this place. However, Mo Tianji took the initiative to move the battlefield 1,000 miles forward. In this way, the geographical advantage was gone. The Li clan, whose actual strength was far inferior, lost the geographical advantage and became even weaker. What was Mo Tianji trying to do? Xiao Chenyu and the others rushed back and told Diwu Qingru about Wu Jucheng's interference. This news was enough to affect the final outcome of the battle. Naturally, they had to inform the leader of the final battle as soon as possible. However, what puzzled everyone was that Diwu Qingru wasn't angry but happy when he heard the news. Under such an absolute advantage, if he still wanted to use the decapitation operation to assassinate Mo Tianji and disrupt the morale of the army and destroy the last source of confidence of the Li clan, he would be clearly bullying them. In a battle between two armies, there was nothing they wouldn't do. Diwu Qingru could use the decapitation operation against anyone. Even against Chu Yang, the master of the Calamity Sword, as long as there was a need, he would still use the decapitation operation without hesitation. He would first destroy the command pivot and the pillar of confidence of the enemy. However, against Mo Tianji, whether there was a way or not, he was absolutely unwilling to use such a method. He could be despicable and shameless on the battlefield, but he couldn't touch the command pivot. Because Mo Tianji was the same as Diwu Qingru. He was an existence that fought with his brain. The battle between them was only a battle between the wise. They only relied on their own intelligence and wisdom against the enemy. If he couldn't give Mo Tianji a relatively fair fight and simply used the strongest force to crush and kill a wise man, even Diwu Qingru himself would feel that he had an unfair advantage and wouldn't feel any sense of accomplishment. He might even develop an inner demon because of this. He would vaguely feel that he was afraid of losing to Mo Tianji. That was why he used such a purely violent method that shouldn't be used. That was why he didn't agree with such a strategic plan. If it weren't for the insistence of the clan heads, Diwu Qingru would have completely rejected this proposal. Now that Wu Jucheng had intervened, Mo Tianji could use this as a pretext to make a fuss. This was exactly what Diwu Qingru wanted. Therefore, Diwu Qingru didn't feel the slightest bit of disgust towards this unfavorable variable. In fact, he was actually very grateful to Wu Jucheng. Why did Mo Tianji choose that place for the final battle? Mo Lei Air was very suspicious. When the two of them saw that there was no movement, they also went down to take a look. He had just returned. Due to Mo Tianji's change of plans, their ambush location became somewhat far away from the battlefield. As the last and strongest successor of the Black Demon, Mo Lei Air naturally had a lot of knowledge about battle formations and killing. Top-notch assassins were the most sensitive to geographical environments. However, she was clueless about Mo Tianji's choice. She really didn't understand why Mo Tianji had given up on a good location for the decisive battle. Time, location, and people, these were the essential elements of a battle since ancient times. The time was decided by both sides. So, it was indisputable. As for the people, the decision-makers of both sides had the highest authority, and no one could disobey their orders. Therefore, both sides were more or less equally matched in this aspect. Moreover, Mo Tianji's overall fighting strength wasn't taken into account. As for the location, it was almost the only place where Mo Tianji and the Li clan had a slight advantage. Yet, Mo Tianji chose to do the opposite and gave up his advantage at the crucial moment of the decisive battle. It wasn't that Chu Yang didn't have any doubts about this either. He was also very confused. Rubbing his chin, he said, "This battle formation, what is it for? Is it to set up a battle formation? But even if it's a battle formation, it's not like Diwu Qingru doesn't know it. In the face of superior forces, even the most mysterious battle formation would be useless." Mo Qingwu smiled lightly and said, "I advise you not to waste your time thinking about it. If you can guess my second brother's intentions, Diwu Qingru would have guessed it long ago too. Don't worry. My second brother has never been willing to take a loss when doing things. Since he has set it up like this, he must have his reasons. Just watch his performance." Chu Yang nodded in agreement. Little Wu is right. It's because even we can't understand it that Diwu Qingru definitely can't either. Although I don't understand, I have a feeling that Diwu Qingru will definitely suffer a big loss this time. Mo Tianji is so evil. Mo Qingwu said unhappily, "How is my second brother evil? Doesn't he just like to pretend to be mysterious so that people can't understand him? That's not to the extent of saying that he's evil." Seeing that Mo Qingwu didn't agree with him, Chu Yang smiled obsequiously and said, "Whatever little Wu says is right. You're right. Women still need to be coaxed." He thought in his heart, with the past and present misunderstandings resolved, it seems that Mo Tianji's status is showing signs of rising. This won't do. I have to suppress him as soon as possible. Mo Qingwu said, "But second brother is indeed quite annoying sometimes. For example, every time he succeeds in his schemes, I want to turn around and leave when I see the smug smile on his face." Chu Yang said in surprise, "Smug smile? What, smug smile? Does Tianji have that kind of smug smile? Why didn't I notice it?" Mo Qingwu curled her lips and said, "That's because you're ignorant. Every time his face shows that kind of mysterious and confident smile, it's when he's the most smug in his heart. Every time he makes people run in circles, he'll smile like that. He's especially good at pretending. In the eyes of others, he's a strategist and has a great demeanor. But only I know that at that time, he's already bursting with joy, beaming from ear to ear and getting carried away. Chu Yang's face was full of sweat. At most, I said that he's bad. You're not happy, but what did you say about him yourself? But in the end, no one knew him better than his sister. Mo Qingwu's memories from her past life had recovered. Coupled with the impressions of this life, her analysis of Mo Tianji could be said to be at the level of an expert. He might not be able to analyze other people so thoroughly, but analyzing Mo Tianji was as easy as taking something out of his pocket. It was incomparably accurate. He was the brains of a generation, the peerless military advisor. In this world, the only person who could restrain him was his younger sister. This matter, no matter how you looked at it, was a little comical, or rather, it should be said that everything has its nemesis. The greatest nemesis of Mo Tianji was none other than Mo Qingwu. Regardless of the joys and sorrows, the sun rose as usual. It added a lot of magnificent and fantastical splendor to this land before the battle. It hadn't appeared in this northwest land for hundreds of thousands of years. But today, the sun shone brightly. The beautiful scenery created was enchanting, enough to dazzle anyone. It was unknown if the heavens and earth also wanted to bear witness to this vast battle, but a cloud of snow mist suddenly rose into the air. It floated in the air, neither high nor low. Under the illumination of the sun, it transformed into a rainbow-colored rainbow. Moreover, it was constantly changing shape and color. At times, it was like a rainbow that traversed the heaven and earth. At other times, it turned into countless galloping horses that soared into the sky. At other times, it turned into pavilions and towers. Everyone couldn't help but be a little fascinated by this strange sight. At this moment, it was as if everyone wasn't here to fight but to sightsee. However, just as everyone was watching this rare spectacle with rapt attention, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Mo Tianji said indifferently, "Elderly, Gong Mi Heaven Absolute Divine Formation, start setting it up immediately." Li Chuanbo nodded and waved his hand. The people below immediately got into action. Then, the flags fluttered and swayed. The team of 8,000 people immediately gathered. Mo Tianji's gentle voice rang in the air. "Brother Diwu, the formation has been activated. Do you dare to break it?" Mo Tianji was challenging him. Formation? Diwu Qingrou's heart skipped a beat. He raised his head and looked over. 7 to 8 people suddenly leaped out from the opposite side. They descended from the mountain as if they were riding on clouds. Then, teams of martial artists emerged from the clouds in front of them at an extremely fast speed. Like long dragons, they swarmed toward the battlefield. Could it be that Mo Tianji wants to compete with me in terms of formations? Diwu Qingrou's eyes were solemn, but he was sneering in his heart. Mo Tianji, should I say that you're overestimating yourself or that you're underestimating this battle of wits? One wrong move and you'll lose everything. A rash decision will lead to an irreversible defeat. It's definitely not just a matter of words. Mo Tianji, you're obviously too rash. In the Li clan team, the 7 to 8 supreme martial artists led by Li Xiangxi at the front had already crossed the central line between the two sides. However, they still didn't stop. The speed of supreme martial artist experts was not to be underestimated. In the blink of an eye, this group of people had advanced another 17 to 18 miles. Their current position was already not far from the Allied forces. Even with the naked eye, they could already vaguely see them. If the entire area was compared to a straight line, then their current position was already 2/3 of the way. Just as the Allied forces were about to move out to meet the enemy, the momentum of the 8 supreme martial artists suddenly stopped. They attacked at the same time. However, their target wasn't anyone on the Allied forces' side. With a loud boom, snow filled the sky. Snow flew into the air, blurring one's vision. Even the strongest experts couldn't see anything under such low visibility. They could only hear the continuous sounds of attacks and explosions. The 8 supreme martial artists seemed to be carrying out some kind of work in that thick fog. Diwu Qingru waved his hand, indicating for everyone to calm down and not act rashly. They should wait for the enemy to come. He wanted to see what kind of tricks the other party could come up with. Since Mo Tianji was challenging him directly, it meant that the other party must have made arrangements. However, no matter what arrangements Mo Tianji could come up with, Diwu Qingru had absolute confidence that he could break them. Coping with all changes by remaining unchanged was a military principle. Chapter 1511. The Li clan, as the host, had the advantage of being familiar with the terrain. Wouldn't they be able to unleash their strength better? Taking advantage of the situation and defeating the enemy was the right way to go. Not only Diwu Qingru, but even Chu Yang, Tan Tan and the others also fixed their gazes on this place. However, Mo Tianji took the initiative to move the battlefield 1,000 miles forward. In this way, the geographical advantage was gone. The Li clan, whose actual strength was far inferior, lost the geographical advantage and became even weaker. What was Mo Tianji trying to do? Xiao Chenyu and the others rushed back and told Diwu Qingru about Wu Zhucheng's interference. This news was enough to affect the final outcome of the battle. Naturally, they had to inform the leader of the final battle at the first opportunity. However, what puzzled everyone was that Diwu Qingru wasn't angry when he heard the news. Instead, he was happy. With such an absolute advantage, if he still wanted to assassinate Mo Tianji and disrupt the morale of the army and destroy the last source of confidence of the Li clan, it would be obvious that he was bullying them. In a battle between two armies, there was nothing they wouldn't do. Diwu Qingru could use the method of decapitation against anyone. Even against Chu Yang, the master of the Calamity Sword, as long as there was a need, he would still use decapitation without hesitation. He would first destroy the command pivot and the pillar of confidence of the enemy. However, against Mo Tianji, whether there was a way or not, he was absolutely unwilling to use such methods. He could be despicable and shameless on the battlefield, but he couldn't touch the command pivot. Because Mo Tianji was the same as Diwu Qingru. He was an existence that used his brain to fight. The battle between them was only a battle between the wise. They only relied on their own intelligence and wisdom to defeat the enemy. If he couldn't give Mo Tianji a relative fairness and simply used the strongest force to crush and kill a wise person, even Diwu Qingru himself would feel that he had an unfair advantage and wouldn't feel any sense of accomplishment. He might even develop an inner demon and vaguely feel that he was afraid of losing to Mo Tianji. That was why he used such a purely violent method that shouldn't be used. That was why he didn't agree with such a strategic plan. If it weren't for the insistence of the clan heads, Diwu Qingru would have completely rejected this proposal. Now, with Wu Zhucheng's interference, Mo Tianji could use this as a pretext to make a fuss. And this was exactly what Diwu Qingru wanted. Therefore, Diwu Qingru didn't have the slightest bit of disgust towards this unfavorable variable. Why did Mo Tianji choose that place for the final battle? Mo Lei Air was very suspicious. Just now, when the two of them saw that there was no movement, they also went down to take a look. He had just returned. Due to Mo Tianji's change of plans, their ambush location became somewhat far away from the battlefield. As the last and strongest successor of the Black Demons, Mo was naturally well-versed in battle formations and killing. Top-notch assassins were the most sensitive to geographical environments. However, she did not understand Mo Tianji's choice. She really didn't understand why Mo Tianji had given up on a good location for the decisive battle. Time, location, and people, these were the essential elements of a battle since ancient times. The time was decided by both sides. So, it was indisputable. As for the people, the decision-makers of both sides had the highest authority, and no one could disobey their orders. Therefore, both sides were more or less equally matched in this aspect. Moreover, Mo Tianji's overall fighting strength wasn't taken into account. Location was the only thing that Mo Tianji and the Li clan had a slight advantage in. Yet, Mo Tianji chose to do the opposite and gave up his advantage at the crucial moment of the decisive battle. It wasn't that Chu Yang didn't have any doubts about this. He was also very confused. Rubbing his chin, he said, "This battle formation, what is it for? Is it to set up a battle formation? But even if it's a battle formation, it's not like Diwu Qingru doesn't know it. Against superior numbers, even the most mysterious battle formation would be useless. Mo Qingwu smiled lightly and said, I advise you not to waste your time thinking about it. If you can guess my second brother's intentions, Diwu Qingru would have guessed it long ago. Don't worry. My second brother has never been willing to take a loss when doing things. Since he has set it up like this, he must have his reasons. Just watch his performance. Chu Yang nodded in agreement. Little Wu is right. Because even we can't understand it, Diwu Qingru definitely can't either. I don't understand it, but I have a feeling that Diwu Qingru will definitely suffer a huge loss this time. Mo Tianji is so evil. Mo Qingwu said unhappily, how is my second brother evil? Doesn't he just like to pretend to be mysterious and make people unable to understand him? That's not to the extent of saying that he's evil. Seeing that Mo Qingwu didn't agree with him, Chu Yang smiled obsequiously and said, whatever little Wu says is right. You're right. Women still need to be coaxed. He thought to himself, with the past and present misunderstandings resolved, it seems that Mo Tianji's status is showing signs of rising. This won't do. I have to suppress him as soon as possible. Mo Qingwu said, but second brother is indeed quite annoying sometimes. For example, every time he succeeds in his schemes, I want to turn around and leave when I see the smug smile on his face. Chu Yang was stunned and said, smug smile? What, smug smile? Does Tianji have that kind of smug smile? Why didn't I notice it? Mo Qingwu curled her lips and said, that's because you're ignorant. Every time he shows that mysterious and confident smile on his face, it's when he's the most smug in his heart. Every time he makes people run in circles, he'll smile like that. He's especially good at pretending. In other people's eyes, he's a strategist and has a great demeanor. But only I know that at that time, he's already bursting with joy in his heart, beaming with joy and losing his sense of measure. Chu Yang's face was full of sweat. At most, I said that he's bad. You're not happy, but what did you say about him yourself? But in the end, no one knew him better than his sister. Mo Qingwu's memories from her past life had recovered. Coupled with her impression of this life, her analysis of Mo Tianji could be said to be at the level of an expert. He might not be able to analyze other people so thoroughly, but analyzing Mo Tianji was as easy as taking something out of his pocket. It was incomparably accurate. He was the brains of a generation, the peerless military advisor. In this world, the only person who could restrain him was his younger sister. This matter, no matter how you looked at it, was a little comical, or rather, it should be said that everything has its nemesis. The greatest nemesis of Mo Tianji was none other than Mo Qingwu. Regardless of the joys and sorrows, the sun rose as usual. It added a lot of magnificent and fantastical splendor to this land before the battle. It hadn't appeared in this northwest land for hundreds of thousands of years. But today, the sun shone brightly. The beautiful scenery created was enchanting, enough to dazzle anyone. It was unknown if the heavens and earth also wanted to bear witness to this vast battle, but a cloud of snow mist suddenly rose into the air. It floated in the air, neither high nor low. Under the illumination of the sun, it transformed into a rainbow-colored rainbow. Moreover, it was constantly changing shape and color. At times, it was like a rainbow that traversed the heaven and earth. At other times, it turned into countless galloping horses that soared into the sky. At other times, it transformed into pavilions and towers. Everyone couldn't help but be a little fascinated by this strange sight. At this moment, everyone seemed to not be here to fight but to sightsee. However, just as everyone was focused on this rare sight that was hard to come by in 10,000 years, Mo Tianji said indifferently, "Elderly, Gong Mi Heaven Absolute Divine Formation, start setting it up immediately." Li Chuanbo nodded and waved his hand. The people below immediately got into action. Then, the flags fluttered and swayed. The army of 8,000 people immediately gathered. Mo Tianji's gentle voice rang in the air. "Brother Diwu, the formation has been set up. Do you dare to break it?" Mo Tianji was challenging him. Formation? Diwu Qingrou's heart skipped a beat. He raised his head and looked over. 7 to 8 people suddenly leaped out from the opposite side. They floated down from the mountain as if they were riding on clouds. Then, teams of martial artists emerged from the clouds in front of them at an extremely fast speed. Like long dragons, they swarmed toward the battlefield. Could it be that Mo Tianji wants to compete with me in terms of formations? Diwu Qingrou's eyes were solemn, but he was sneering in his heart. Mo Tianji, should I say that you're overestimating yourself or that you're underestimating this battle of wits? One wrong move and you'll lose everything. A rash decision will lead to an irreversible defeat. It's not just a matter of words. Mo Tianji, you're obviously too rash. In the Li clan's army, the 7 to 8 supreme martial artists led by Li Xiangxi at the front had already crossed the center line between the two sides, but they still didn't stop. The speed of supreme martial artist experts was not to be underestimated. In the blink of an eye, this group of people had advanced another 17 to 18 miles. Their current position was already not far from the Allied forces. Even with the naked eye, they could already vaguely see them. If the entire area was compared to a straight line, then their current position was already 2/3 of the way. Just as the Allied forces were about to move out to meet the enemy, the momentum of the 8 supreme martial artists suddenly came to a halt. They attacked at the same time. However, the target of their attack wasn't anyone from the Allied forces. With a boom, snow filled the sky. Snow flew into the air, blurring one's vision. No matter how strong an expert was, he couldn't see anything at all under such low visibility. He could only hear the continuous sounds of attacks and explosions. The 8 supreme martial artists seemed to be carrying out some kind of work in that area of thick fog. Diwu Qingrou waved his hand, indicating for everyone to calm down and not act rashly. They should wait for the enemy to come. He wanted to see what kind of tricks the other party could come up with. Since Mo Tianji had challenged him directly, it meant that the other party must have made arrangements. However, no matter what arrangements Mo Tianji could come up with, Diwu Qingrou had absolute confidence that he could break through them. Countering all changes by remaining unchanged was a military principle. Chapter 15:12. Diwu Qingrou smiled. By then, we won't be breaking the formation but a one-sided massacre. A head-on battle between 8,000 people and 8,000 people. I predict that our 8,000 people will only lose a few hundred at most, or even less, and we will be able to wipe out the 8,000 people of the other party. At the side, an 8th grade supreme martial artist muttered, "Didn't you say that you want a fair battle? Battle formations? In this case, won't it become a conspiracy again?" Diwu Qingrou snorted and said, "I've already said that this is a decisive battle. What battle formations? For Mo Tianji to make such a decision, it's his mistake and not us being despicable. This is a decisive battle. Naturally, we'll use all means possible. Everything is for the sake of protecting our own strength and attacking the enemy. Where is there any fairness?" All the supreme martial artists expressed their agreement. If we still insist on a fair battle with the other party at such a time, we'd really be out of our minds. Don't tell me that we have to accept the other party's suggestion of a decisive battle. One of the supreme martial artists nodded fiercely and said, "Yes, do we have to accept the other party's suggestion of a fair one-on-one duel? With hundreds of thousands of people taking turns to fight, we may all die of old age before the battle is over." Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter at once. As they spoke, Li Chuan's voice came from afar. "Gong mi divine formation. Do you dare to fight it? Fight with formations?" Xiao Chenyu laughed and said, "Chuanbua, this time, I'll let you win." His voice was full of confidence. Yes, with Diwu Qingrou's arrangement, this extremely dangerous, extravagant and sturdy formation of the other party was just a complete joke. Like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, the battle would be decided. Diwu Qingrou waved his hand and a series of muffled drum beats sounded, seemingly shaking the whole sky. Group after group of experts from the big clans, with bloodthirsty expressions and murderous auras, quickly got into formation. In order to prevent the other party from retreating when they saw that the situation wasn't right, All of this was done extremely quickly in an instant. Then, Diwu Qingru shouted softly, "Go!" Kill. The flag on the mountain top waved and pointed forward. 8 groups of people shot out like arrows leaving the bow. They were like 8 long swords that could take one's life or soul, surging with murderous intent. On the opposite side, Li Chuanhua's countenance changed drastically as he shouted furiously, "Xiao Qinyu! What is this? How is this a battle formation? How is this a fair battle?" With this kind of momentum, even people who didn't understand Xian cultivation could see that the 8,000 people on this side and the 8,000 people on the other side weren't on the same level. On one hand, primary school students were sent to participate in the battle. On the other hand, they had directly mobilized the regular army. That was the difference. The difference in strength was like heaven and earth. Xiao Qinyu looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. "Chuanhua, my good brother. Actually, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time. The reason why you've fallen to your current state is because you pursue fairness in everything. But you don't know what fairness is? Fairness? There is no such thing as fairness in this world." Xiao Qinyu's wild laughter reverberated between heaven and earth. Fairness has never existed since the beginning of the world. The sky will always be the sky, and the earth will always be the earth. If we really want to be fair, then shouldn't the heavens and earth also need to swap places every once in a while? Why has it never happened before? Ever since people appeared, there has been even less true fairness. Both are born after 10 months of pregnancy, but some are born in noble families while others can only be born in the thatched huts of beggars. Is this fair? Who do you ask for fairness from? Some are born smart and wise, while others are born stupid. Who do you ask for fairness from? In these hundreds of thousands of years, more than billions of innocent people have died in the hands of experts. Who do these people want to ask for fairness from? Xiao Qinyu burst into laughter. Now, my army is coming with an unstoppable momentum. Their strength is dozens of times more than yours. How can there be any fairness in a battle of life and death? Li Chuanhua trembled all over. Could. Since that's the case, then why do I still pursue fairness? Since I'm going to destroy my family and clan no matter what, I'll just wait and see. The reason why Li Chuanhua shouted that it was unfair earlier was actually because of Mo Tianji's instructions. The purpose of Li Chuanhua's act was naturally to numb the enemy so that they wouldn't see through his true intentions. However, Xiao Qinyu's talk of fairness made Li Chuanhua's heart as cold as dead ashes. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the 8 troops of the allied forces had already arrived in front of the Li clan's formation. On the top of the mountain, Mo Tianji stood with his hands behind his back. His expression was calm and emotionless as he watched the ant-like crowd below approach. The conversation between Li Chuanhua and Xiao Qinyu reverberated in his ears, but it was as if he didn't hear a single word. It was only when Li Chuanhua finished his last sentence that Mo Tianji's lips curled into a cold smile. He murmured, "That's right. How can there be true fairness in this world? Diwu Qingru, you have never thought of fairness. Mo Tianji, have never thought of it either. Since all of you yearn for unfairness and intend to achieve things through unfairness, then I'll give you unfairness." Chu Luo was a little puzzled. She asked, "Big brother Mo, I see that the other party is fully prepared. Aren't those people on our side sending themselves to their deaths? How are you going to give them unfairness?" Mo Tianji's lips curled into a cold smile. He looked down without blinking. He said, "They're not sending themselves to their deaths. Their purpose in coming here is only to perish together with us. This formation is an extremely extravagant bait. It's also an extremely realistic bait. And Diwu Qingru has already swallowed this bait. According to fairness, it's only fair that a 4th-grade martial saint dies at the hands of a 2nd-grade martial saint. After all, the other party has enjoyed more resources than him and has gone through hundreds of years of cultivation more than him. But now it's all in one pot. What's the point of going to the netherworld together?" Mo Tianji looked at the 8 troops of the other party. As expected, they didn't attack the formation from the front. Instead, they entered through the 8 doors. The cold smile on his lips became even more cruel. You didn't intend to fight with me in terms of formations. Actually, I didn't intend to either. Just as Xiao Chenyu said, your actual strength is dozens of times greater than ours. Why should I fight with you in terms of formations? Why talk about fairness? You wanted to destroy us easily, but you didn't expect that I wouldn't even give you the chance to do so. Because there was no battle here at all. There were only explosions. Diwu Qingru looked at the 8 troops of the other party. They didn't forcefully break through the outer formation. Instead, they followed his instructions and entered the foggy land of the heaven-annihilating divine formation in an orderly manner. His eyes flashed with calmness. Once they entered, it was equivalent to the end of the battle. He seemed to have tasted the results of the first battle. It was just that it wasn't as sweet as he had imagined, because it seemed a little too simple. Mo Tianji was ultimately too young. His thinking was too simple. He and Chu Yang were heroes. They hoped to use the actions of heroes to demand of the enemy. However, they neglected the enemy's characteristics. I, Diwu Qingru, have never been a hero. I am a formidable person. A formidable person who would do anything for the sake of victory. If they still couldn't win with such a huge disparity in strength, or even if they couldn't win completely, then all the over 8,000 experts who had entered would die of shame without waiting for others to say anything. After the 8,000 people in front of him were wiped out, the Li clan would only be left with high-end forces, the last of their forces. Then, the follow-up plan. Just as Diwu Qingru started to consider the future battle situation, suddenly, Li Chuanhua's tragic voice came from the opposite side. Li Chuanhua's voice was like thunder in the sky, shaking the heavens and the earth. The majestic northwest will last for thousands of years. Wind blades and frost swords will bury the snow. The Li clan's spring and autumn has been generous since ancient times. Iron blood and strong aspirations will shake the northern fortress. Heroes will be everywhere. Bless my clan and its name will be passed down for generations. In today's battle, winds will come from all directions. Strong enemies will be oppressed, but iron bones will not grieve. I will return with you, I will be with you. At this moment, Li Chuanhua's voice was unusually heavy and solemn. As if he was mourning, his slow and solemn voice reverberated between heaven and earth for a long time. A tragic and stirring momentum, atmosphere, and aura rushed back and forth in the midst of the surrounding snowy mountains in broad daylight. 72 words. Every word was like a gem, sonorous and resonant. They spoke of the Li clan's glory and helplessness. They spoke of the Li clan's grievances, the Li clan's heroism and unyielding spirit. And the Li clan's determination. The determination to fight to the death. While his voice was still reverberating in the air, Diwu Qingru's expression had already changed. He shouted, "Attack immediately! Break the formation at full speed!" His voice became unusually sharp, and there was even a hint of panic in it. This wise man who had been through many battles seemed to have already sensed the arrival of an unknown danger and knew what the other party was going to do. However, opposite him, Li Chuanhua had already shouted fiercely at the same time, "The grandson of the Li clan, I will return with you." In the Gong Mi Heaven Absolute Divine Formation, the voices of 8,000 people rang out tragically. "The grandson of the Li clan, I will return with you." With the tragic roar, all the Li clan members who had not participated in the battle, regardless of gender or age, dropped to their knees at the same time, sobbing uncontrollably. Those of the Li clan who were supreme martial artists and above, led by Li Chuanhua, bowed to the ground at the same time. They didn't get up for a long time. Right at this moment, boom! An unprecedentedly loud explosion suddenly rang out. 8,000 martial saints and 10 supreme martial artists self-destructed at the same time. The power of the explosion this time was practically earth-shattering. In fact, it was unprecedented and unparalleled. Although it was often said to be earth-shattering, it didn't really live up to its name. However, the explosion this time really lived up to its name. In fact, not only was it earth-shattering, it was also an unprecedentedly huge explosion. Xiao Chenyu, who was already at the peak of supreme martial artist, was actually shaken by the aftershocks of the explosion. He could only feel a roar in his head. At the position where the Gongmi Heaven Absolute Divine Formation was previously, a huge black hole appeared, extending in all directions with crackling sounds. Under this clear and bright sky, many dark and sinister space cracks appeared like demonic snakes. The 8,000 brothers of the Li clan and the 8,000 experts of the allied forces who had just entered were all annihilated at the same time. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. From small to large, it soared high into the sky and spread out. Countless broken limbs and body parts were turned into debris and shot out in all directions. Rumble. Chapter 1513. The nearby mountains and those that were nearby directly collapsed. The foundation of the entire mountain started to shake. Amidst the avalanche, the large rocks on the mountain jumped up as if they were alive. Then, like dumplings, they fell down and the mountain collapsed. Rumble. Thousands of feet of snow on the entire land jumped up and down along with the explosion. As the mushroom cloud rose, clouds of snow and dust that were thousands of feet thick also rose up. In this instant, it was as if many more pillars had been added to the northwest. Diwu Qingru was violently shaken. His face was pale. He felt that the mountain under his feet was collapsing. He hurriedly took preventive measures. Beside him, countless people rolled on the ground like gourds. They couldn't stand properly at all. Golden bells rang in their ears. In that instant, everyone lost their hearing at the same time. Diwu Qingru secretly cried out in his heart that he had miscalculated. As a wise man, he had instantly figured out the true meaning of Mo Tianji's plan. He didn't expect the other party to be so ruthless. The lives of 8,000 experts turned into an earth-shattering sound in an instant. This ruthlessness, this decisiveness, this boldness of a warrior cutting his wrist. This was truly a huge move. And those 100 million purple crystals. The effect of those purple crystals was actually not to defend against the outside but to restrain the power of the explosion. All the power was restrained and confined within the formation. If not for that, the range of the explosion would definitely not have been limited to this. But it was also because of this that the power of the explosion this time was extremely concentrated. The effect it created was naturally extremely terrifying. The flesh, blood, and essence of 8,000 saints and 10 supremes exploded at the same time. This in itself was already so powerful that it could shake the heavens and earth. Moreover, there was also the 100 million purple crystals that Mo Tianji had set up. 100 million purple crystals had increased the power of this explosion by tenfold. Of the 8,000 enemies who had already entered the formation, there would definitely not be a single person who would survive. Even if an expert like Wu Jueqing was inside, he would definitely die in today's situation. There had never been such a situation before and it might not be replicated in the future. Because today was already a great example. No one would fall into the same trap again. Today's situation was unprecedented. At this moment, Diwu Qingru finally completely understood Mo Tianji's plan. Why did he have to forcefully change the terrain and set up a formation in front of the enemy's eyes? Why did he have to use such low-end battle power as the first line of troops? More importantly, why did he have to arrange the Gongmi Heaven annihilating divine formation on the side closer to the allied forces? All of these were mere illusions. That kind of fierceness of a battle to the death was also very impressive. 100 million purple crystals was an even more powerful bait. The purpose of these low-end fighting forces was to perish together with the enemy, to use all of their life force to launch the most terrifying attack. Following this huge explosion, the impact spread far and wide. The Allied army's camp was sent flying into the air at almost the same time. Countless men and horses were knocked to the ground, and many of them were bleeding from their 7 orifices, suffering from internal injuries. In addition, countless mountains collapsed and the earth cracked, rolling down. At this moment, the area around the explosion was like the end of the world. The reason for this glorious victory included the lives of 8,000 people who fought without hesitation, billions of purple crystals, and most importantly, Mo Tianji's ingenious calculations and meticulous arrangements that saw through people's hearts. If the commander of the Allied forces wasn't Diwu Qingru, he might not have recognized that the formation was the Gong Mi Heaven Annihilating Divine Formation. If Diwu Qingru didn't understand the Gong Mi Heaven Annihilating Divine Formation and knew that this formation couldn't be broken by brute force, the Allied forces wouldn't have chosen to evade the important and dwell on the trivial. After entering the formation, they didn't immediately attack the people inside, giving the people guarding the formation too much time and opportunity to attack. In a sense, this result was the result of Diwu Qingru's full cooperation, and also the result of Imo Tianji's scheme against Diwu Qingru. Using the methods of an absolute expert to deceive an absolute expert. Imo Tianji's plan this time could be said to be a big deal, a big spirit, and a big scheme. Without any of these, he wouldn't have achieved this result. Regarding this situation, Diwu Qingru, who understood everything, didn't feel defeated. He only felt admiration. Diwu Qingru had been calculating all his life, and it was rare for him to be calculated by others. Now that he had done so, he only had admiration in his heart. Such a wise man was indeed worthy of respect. Even if it was an enemy, there would be no exception. A long time after the explosion, the heaven and earth were still trembling non-stop. Light smoke was rising everywhere. There were sounds of mountains and tsunamis all around. On the ground, a huge pit seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. It covered an area of thousands of feet and was bottomless. The lives of a total of 8,000 warriors had turned into an earth-shattering explosion at this moment. They already knew that their strength wouldn't be of much use in this final battle. They wouldn't even have the chance to attack when facing the enemy. They would be slaughtered. But when Imo Tianji proposed this plan to die together with them, no one hesitated. In this battle, their status was absolutely weak, but they ultimately played an unprecedentedly huge role. In the last 10 days, these people didn't go out. They just quietly stayed in their own homes to reunite with their loved ones. It didn't matter how rude, unreasonable, irritable, or heartless he was in the past, or if his wives and concubines were stolen or defrauded, or if he was originally kind and stood aloof from worldly affairs, or if he was originally a person who enjoyed the company of others. Everyone had miraculously behaved exactly the same in these 10 days. They just waited quietly. They didn't practice martial arts, didn't drink, didn't do anything. They just watched and accompanied their family members tenderly and reluctantly. They did those trivial things with them that they used to disdain and talked about those family affairs. Even if they were usually irritable, they had never been so quiet in these 10 days. Li Hong's wife was the daughter of the head of the Li clan's enemy force. He was the one who killed his wife's entire family. But because he coveted his wife's beauty, he snatched her back and forced her to be his wife. The couple spent their lives in a cold war, but in these 10 days, Li Hong just quietly accompanied his wife, smiling gently. Every day, he cooked for the whole family with his clumsy culinary skills. When someone complained that the food was bad, he chuckled. Every night, he actually washed his wife's feet very carefully and gently. It was just that he still didn't say a word of apology. What happened back then wasn't something that could be resolved with just a word of apology. He just expressed his final feelings. Li Qingyun, this collateral descendant of the Li clan, naturally didn't have high cultivation achievements due to his poor aptitude. Usually, he would complain from time to time that the clan didn't give him any resources. He could be said to be the biggest thorn in the Li clan, the most difficult troublemaker to deal with. Even Li Wubua and the others would feel a headache whenever they saw him. But in these 10 days, the thing that this troublemaker did the most was kowtow. He kowtowed to his ancestors. My surname is Li. Li Qinggong, who was less than 40 years old this year, was already a 4th-grade martial saint. He had always felt that he was a genius, a rare genius. His usual personality was naturally arrogant and domineering. He was even more domineering in the clan and had bullied many people. But in these 10 days, he greeted everyone he met with a smile. His attitude was almost humble as he sincerely begged for others' forgiveness. As long as the other party said, "It's all right now," or "I forgive you," he would immediately be full of smiles. Before he died, all his debts had to be cleared. Lian had always been the most arrogant and unruly. Because his father tried to discipline him, he once got into a fight with his father and eventually broke his father's arm. But in these 10 days, the thing that he did the most was to massage his old father's broken arm and his whole body. In the morning and at night, he would greet his father in the morning and at night. In the afternoon, he would help his father out for a walk. His old father was old and his nose was flowing. He would often wipe his nose on Li, and when he tilted his head, Lian smiled gently and used his white robe to wipe his father's nose. He even lowered his head and tasted his old father's nose with his tongue when no one else could see. At that moment, his eyes were filled with tears. His father raised him. He still remembered that his father was as strong as a mountain when he was young. Now, he didn't even know how to wipe his own nose, but he actually didn't pay attention to it and even broke his father's arm. How unfilial! How utterly devoid of conscience! There was no need to apologize. There was only action. I was wrong. But I don't have time. If there is a next life, I still want to be your son to make up for the mistakes in this life. There were many more. There were also some young men who had just gotten married. The young couple was inseparable for 10 days. This situation lasted until the night of the first day. These 8,000 people gathered together in the ancestral hall of the Li clan. Without a word, they knelt down and kowtowed silently. That kind of scene was shocking, heartbreaking, and tearful. However, not a single one of the 8,000 people cried. There was only determination and tenacity. After 3 kowtows, they walked out proudly. The time for the final battle had arrived. Not a single one of the 8,000 people was missing. All of them appeared and lined up neatly, their expressions calm. Behind them, the doors of the 8,000 families were wide open. The families leaned against the doors and looked at each other, sending each other off with red makeup. Tears streamed down their faces silently. However, none of the 8,000 people turned back. The brothers of the Li clan, together in death. Under the bows of their ancestors, from the first-generation clans Li Chuanbua, the 8,000 people ended their lives in the most shocking way possible. They turned into dust just like that. Together with the 8,000 enemies who were much, much stronger than them, they turned into smoke at the same time and turned into a loud explosion. At the end of an instant, they turned into smoke. The love and hatred of the past, the lofty aspirations of the past, the sins of the past, everything became a thing of the past. Li Chuanbua straightened up, tears streaming down his face. Chapter 1514. Li Chuanbua and Li Xiangxi heaved a long sigh at the same time. They had nothing to say. They couldn't help but lament in their hearts. Why didn't anyone tell us this in the past? If we had followed this advice, the Li clan wouldn't have been wiped out today. We could have continued to prosper for 10,000 years, many tens of thousands of years. They valued martial prowess but neglected their roots. In the face of life and death, even a coward can transform into a warrior. A warrior will also be afraid of death. A despicable person may not necessarily be unable to face difficulties generously. A righteous person will also seek comfort. No one can clearly describe the change in an instant. Could be sublimation or degeneration. At the side, Chu Lutter said slowly, "Therefore, there's really nothing to sigh about. There's only pride. Because after all, they didn't choose to live an ignoble life and be afraid of death. Among these people, I only respect those who are usually very kind and righteous. Because they are worthy of my respect. But the others," Chu Lutter sneered and said, "Previously, I've also heard you guys talk about how some of these people conduct themselves. Many of them aren't open and above board, nor are they righteous. 10 days before their deaths, they all repented, so it's worth being moved by them. But what's worth thinking about is, why must they only repent right before their deaths? Why must they only realize their own foolishness and loss when there's no way out at all? How can a mere 10 days of repentance make up for a lifetime of harm? What have they done in the past? If that's the case, then can I assume that if they didn't have the pressure of life and death this time, and were faced with certain death, then perhaps these people wouldn't repent for their entire lives, and might not even repent even after death?" Chu Lur's cold voice reverberated in the air. Everyone, including Mo Tianji, was stunned. Yes, Chu Lu's words were very heartless and cold. They were even very cold-blooded and pierced the heart. But they hit the nail on the head and pointed out the crux of the problem. At a time when people's hearts were most easily softened and moved, Chu Lu maintained a high level of clarity. Even though she was an outsider, it was still extremely rare. Although this clarity, calmness, coldness, and was almost cold-blooded and cruel. But in this world, there were very few people who could do and think of such cruelty. Chu Lu had a rough childhood and was plagued with illness. Every night was like crossing the door of life and death 100 times. This also created Chu Lu's unique personality. What she treasured the most was what she had now. No matter how good it was, Chu Lu wouldn't be tempted by anything that couldn't be in her hands now. They wouldn't take it seriously. Chu Lu said lightly, "There are all kinds of honors after death. It's better to live with a little filial piety." Mo Tianji said, "U's words are a little extreme. To be able to repent at the last moment, it's also because she found her conscience." Chu Lu said coldly, "Is that so? I am not used to this kind of behavior of people who only repent when they are on the brink of death. Instead, I feel that it is better for these people to die after they repent. His family didn't feel too bad when he died, because he deserved to die. So, they just sighed a few times and let it go. Unfortunately, he had done evil for a generation, but he repented before he died, leaving his family with eternal sadness. That's why I don't agree." Chu Lu's pretty brows were cold as she said, "If it were me, I'd rather die a worse death than let my family be sad after my death." Mo Tianji was greatly surprised at once. He didn't expect Chu Lu to say something like this. Although it was a little extreme, it was definitely reasonable. Moreover, it should be something that an old person who had been through life and death for a long time could say. But how old was Chu Lu? Why did she have such thoughts? Chu Lu said, "The dead are gone." She glanced at Mo Tianji. Mo Tianji was shocked and immediately realized something. He looked deeply at Chu Lu and said, "Yes, now is not the appropriate time to sigh. Inform the army to retreat at full speed immediately." Retreat at full speed? Li Chuan's tears hadn't dried yet. He looked at Mo Tianji with some astonishment. Mo Tianji had gathered all the people who were participating in the battle here and assumed a posture of cutting off all means of retreat. Now that they had the upper hand, they should pursue the victory. Why did they have to retreat instead? Or retreat at full speed immediately? What kind of explanation was this? "Our final battlefield can't be here. We'll suffer a big loss here." Mo Tianji insipidly said, "Our battlefield should be 500 kilometers behind. That place is surrounded by mountains. The mountain ranges are stacked on top of each other. That's our greatest geographical advantage. Then why did you come here and rush back?" The reason why I assumed such a posture is naturally to lure Diwu Qingru into my trap. If not, with Diwu Qingru's intelligence, why would he send those 8,000 experts into the formation? Mo Tianji said indifferently, "Now that 8,000 of them have been turned into ashes, our greatest goal has been achieved. Of course, we have to retreat and retreat at the fastest speed possible." Just as Xiao Chenyu said, there is no such thing as fairness in this world. Fairness is something that only the strong can have. Diwu Qingru's side couldn't see through my plan and thus fell into the trap. Then, it is only natural for them to suffer losses. Now that the other side is in chaos, if we rush over to fight at this time, even if we can't win. Li Xiangxi looked at the chaos on the other side and was a little tempted. By the time we rush over, we will have fallen into Diwu Qingru's trap. Mo Tianji coldly said, "The other side has indeed lost 8,000 men. But these 8,000 men are only low-end forces to the other side. The other side's high-end forces haven't been damaged at all. Moreover, they're filled with shame and anger. They're in a state of mourning. Are we going to throw our lives away if we go over? If you are willing, you can go ahead and court death. I will not stop you." These words could be said to be extremely rude. Li Xiangxi's face turned red. "Since that's the case, as the military advisor wishes, retreat at full speed." Li Chuanbua made a prompt decision and gave the order at once. When all the Li clan members received the order, none of them moved immediately. Instead, they all looked at the deep pit in the ground in unison. As they stared, it was as if they could see the 8,000 brothers entering the formation without any hesitation and hear that heroic cry, "Brothers of the Li clan, together we return to the same place." Everyone stared deeply. Finally, they turned back decisively and quickly retreated with the army. On the battlefield, a huge pit was in sight. After tens of thousands of years, this place had become a natural ice lake. Despite the vicissitudes of life, its appearance remained unchanged. It was known as the return to the same lake. On the opposite side, in this place where the world was shaking violently, Diu Qingru kept looking at the opposite side, anticipating the other party's next move. "Mo Tianji, this is a heaven-sent opportunity for you. As long as you charge over, the results of the battle will definitely be even more glorious. Will you charge over? Can you resist the urge to charge over? As long as you charge over, I will definitely teach you an unforgettable lesson. I will return the defeat that I just received back to you." After a long time, there was no movement from the opposite side. Diwu Qingru sighed softly. "Looks like this rare defeat will have to stay with me for the time being. The other party must have already retreated. Obviously, the other party's purpose so far was only to take advantage of him this once. Now that he had taken advantage of him, he would stop while he was ahead. He would definitely not be greedy and advance prematurely. This was indeed not the battlefield for the final battle. And Mo Tianji was obviously not someone who was greedy for small gains. A faint sense of admiration rose in Diwu Qingru's heart. This time, he had indeed been fully schemed against by the other party. But he was completely convinced by the other party's scheme. The other party had actually thought of such a tragic and desperate plan. He had even calculated every detail of a person's heart. The setup was superb. It was absolutely reasonable that he had lost this round. Despicable and shameless. Really too despicable. Beside him, a middle-grade supreme martial artist spat out the sand and mud in his mouth. He cursed furiously. How can such a despicable method be considered heroic? They actually exchanged such a small amount of strength for 8,000 of our experts. A total of 8,000 people were cheated just like that? Another supreme martial artist also cried out in grief and indignation. They said that they would fight the final battle here, but they slipped away like a rabbit. Going back on their words, what kind of strategist are they? They are more like gutless bandits. Another person's eyes reddened. At this moment, the allied forces were all agitated. "Shut up. All of you, shut up." Diwu Qingru slowly stood up. At this moment, the tremors on the mountain had gradually subsided. He looked coldly at the supreme martial artists in front of him. What exactly is the other party despicable and shameless? This is the final battle. This is a place where life and death are at stake. This is the most suitable place for despicable and shameless. What are you unhappy about? What are you barking about? Everyone was instantly speechless. They had never seen Diwu Qingru so angry before. You are allowed to take advantage of others? Not abide by the rules? Break the rules? But don't allow others to use tricks? What kind of mentality is this? Diwu Qingru said heavily, with such mentality, even if there are another 1,000 or 10,000 battles, you will still lose. Even if you are lucky enough to win, it will be a dishonorable victory. What do you mean by cheated? We lost 8,000 people, but didn't the other party also lose 8,000 people? How is this cheated? A life for a life. If you die, you can only blame your own incompetence. What do you mean by blaming the enemy? Since they are the enemy, can you blame them? As for the final battle here, who agreed with you? Do you think that the final battle on the battlefield is a Jianghu duel? Ridiculous. Diwu Qingru said angrily, "Everyone, get to your positions. What are you shouting for? All of you are impudent. This explosion is just the prelude to the final battle. This is just the beginning." During this period of time, Diwu Qingru's authority had been increasing day by day. The supreme martial artists were all silent out of fear. No one dared to refute him. Xiao Chenyu sighed and said, "Commander-in-Chief Di Wu is right. All of you have been too successful these years. Once there is a setback, you become like this. It will be difficult for you to achieve great things." However, Xiao Chenyu's words set the tone right away. They firmly supported Di Wu Qingru. Chapter 15:15. Even Xiao Chenyu couldn't help but feel a lingering fear from the explosion just now. With such a scale of self-destruction, even if he, a peak-level supreme martial artist, was inside, he would probably be turned into a pile of minced meat. There might not even be a chance of survival. A wise man could kill a strong man. Therefore, Di Wu Qingru had to fight with all his might here as well. If there were any obstacles in the battle, this battle, even if they could win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Huge losses would be unavoidable, because the other party would definitely grab hold of any opportunity that could be used. Therefore, at this moment, he immediately expressed his stance and gave Di Wu Qingru his full support. Indeed, after he said this, everyone looked at Di Wu Qingru in a different light. Di Wu Qingru took a deep breath and said, "Immediately reorganize the army and pursue at full speed. If I'm not wrong, the real battleground is 1,000 miles ahead of us, in the boundless mountains." Everyone agreed in unison and went to reorganize the army. After a long while, there were still sporadic avalanches here and there, but everyone on their side had already climbed out. They stood neatly and moved forward. However, everyone's expressions were obviously not as relaxed as before the explosion. If Mo Tianji could cause such an accident once, if he could cause a second accident, would it be my turn? Under Mo Tianji's command, the Li clan's troops quickly retreated into the mountains with complicated terrain. Wu Jueqing sighed a little. He never expected that Mo Tianji chose that place as his base with great fanfare. Other than taking advantage of the situation, he didn't achieve anything at all. In the end, it was just a feint. At this point, this battle has finally entered the right path. Chu Yang stood at the top of the mountain and sighed. Entering the right path is also approaching the end. The Li clan is one step closer to destruction. Mo Qingwu said, although the Li clan had taken advantage of the situation just now, second brother probably doesn't feel too good about it. The battle was simply too tragic. So many brave men were reduced to ashes in just one night. Chu Yang silently pulled her into his arms and softly said, "Little Wu, you're wrong. Those 8,000 people died for a reason. The results of the battle that they brought had already far exceeded their value. They should be thanking Mo Tianji for being able to die so heroically. That's because their names will certainly go down in history, and their names will be passed down for eternity." Said, "Yes, from the way things are going, no matter what, they have to die. If they don't die heroically, they will only be slaughtered by the enemy like pigs and dogs. He died without any dignity or value. Now, it can be said that his death was worth it, and his death was glorious." Wu Jueqing replied, "Yes. Since I'm destined to die, to be able to die with honor is the greatest consolation for a man. Moreover, it can also reduce the enemy's morale." Dong Wushang had been silent all this while. At this moment, he opened his mouth and said indifferently, "Well said, well said." Wu Jueqing abruptly rolled his eyes. This little thing really doesn't know how to respect the elders. The tone of this sentence was like an elder praising a junior. How ridiculous. When I have the chance, I will definitely take good care of you and let you know why flowers are so red. It's about time. It's time for our side to make a move. Chu Yang chuckled softly. His sharp eyebrows suddenly rose slowly, and his eyes flashed with an inexplicable, strange look. "Boss, you're not going to reveal yourself in this battle, are you?" Dong Wushang could feel the aura on Chu Yang's body rising steadily. His eyes couldn't help but light up as he asked. Everyone turned to look at Chu Yang. The Tian clan really didn't think about this aspect. They didn't expect Dong Wushang, who was famous for being simple-minded, to be the first to raise this question. Now that they revealed themselves, their brothers were all at the level of second-grade supreme martial artists. If compared to the previous tribulations, They were indeed unprecedentedly strong. However, compared to the current high-end combat power of the continent, they weren't that outstanding. It could even be said that there were many dangers, and the danger was dozens of times higher. It was tantamount to placing oneself at the heart of the storm. The risk was too great. This was a major decision, and also a very dangerous one. Chu Yang grinned and said, "Wu Shang is right. I have the same idea. This sword of calamity hasn't appeared in the open on this continent for tens of thousands of years. I want this #1 divine weapon in the world to shine with its true brilliance today." Wu Jueqing was taken aback. He said, "Chu Yang, I think it's better for you to consider this decision a little more before you make it. Revealing yourself now will only bring you harm but hardly any benefit. This is really not the right time." Wu Jueqing's words were definitely not alarmist. One must know that the Li clan was about to be destroyed, and the Lan clan was already finished. The power structure of the upper three heavens was bound to be redrawn. Because of the clash of interests, it was bound to cause conflict between the original powers. Chu Yang's faction should be waiting at ease for the exhausted, looking for opportunities to sow discord from both sides. When all the major powers were fighting, they could then sit back and reap the benefits. The tribulation this time was different from the previous tribulation sword masters. Because, without the support of the law enforcers, they had the addition of the law enforcers, their greatest enemy. Revealing himself now would instead cause the big clans to reunite. After all, the tribulation sword master was the biggest enemy of the big clans, their common enemy. Emole, and Imo Qingwu were also a little worried. Although they also believed in Chu Yang's ability, the difference in strength between them and the enemy was too great. The Li clan was an excellent example. In the face of absolute strength, no matter how ingenious the plan was or how unshakable the will was, it was impossible to deal with it. Only the fist was the absolute truth. To be honest, I didn't want to reveal myself so early either. Chu Yang smiled and said, "My original plan was to reveal my identity when all of my brothers reached the level of second-grade supreme martial artist. That way, I could intimidate and dominate the world. But now, I can't hide any longer. Time is not on my side." Wu Jueqing's heart skipped a beat. He understood and said, "Is it because of that black aura? The extraterrestrial demon?" Chu Yang nodded solemnly and said, "No, it's because of the extraterrestrial demons. Their traces have appeared in the heavens. I have no other choice. If I continue to hide and secretly increase the strength of my side, then this continent will definitely fall into disputes and internal strife until the end. If I completely ignore it, when we finally unify the heavens, the number of experts who will be able to survive in the end will probably not exceed the current number of 11. If there wasn't this hidden danger of the extraterrestrial demons, I wouldn't care how many people would die. But now, the extraterrestrial demons have already been confirmed. I don't know why they have come down, whether it's voluntary or forced, or whether it's a coincidence, but the fact is that the extraterrestrial demons already exist in this world. And with our current strength, we can't match them at all. The extraterrestrial demons are the common enemy of all of us. This cannot be denied and no one can deny it. If when the strong enemy arrives, everyone still can't unite against the outside world, I'm afraid. Before our brother Jie unifies the heavens, this world would have already become a base for the extraterrestrial demons." Wu Jueqing frowned and said, "This may be a little overthinking. That aura that came down that day may not necessarily be the real body of the extraterrestrial demon, right?" Chu Yang shook his head and said solemnly, "Elder Wu, aren't you deceiving yourself? The Dharma Supreme has the aura of the extraterrestrial demon. Even if the Dharma Supreme's cultivation isn't the best in the world today, he can at least be in the top 5, right? But how strong is the aura of the extraterrestrial demon on him? It's completely incomparable. Not to mention Yi Zhe of the Yi clan. And the aura that came down that day almost covered the entire world. How powerful is that? If such an aura is only a fragment of the extraterrestrial demon, or some weapon that broke through time and space and came here, I definitely won't believe it. Therefore, The extraterrestrial demons must have come. This is no longer something we can deny. If we don't handle it well, the entire heavens continent, be it the upper three heavens, the lower three heavens, or the upper three heavens, will definitely be poisoned. I, Chu Yang, may not be a benevolent person with lofty ideals, but there are too many kind and innocent people in this world. Even if we can protect ourselves, how can we bear to see everyone in the world become food for the extraterrestrial demons? Chu Yang smiled warmly. Besides, there are still our families and many people we care about. But as long as the Tribulation Sword Master appears, then a core will naturally be formed. When that time comes, if the great clans can make the decision to fight the extraterrestrial demons, then I don't necessarily have to exterminate all the great clans. The fate of the great clans can be destroyed by the Tribulation Sword Master, but it can also be rewritten by him. That's it. Difficult. Wu Jueqing shook his head vigorously. I can only describe this idea of yours as whimsical. The great clans regard the fate of tribulation very highly. Back then, my brothers and I also encountered such a situation. At that time, we didn't want to kill too much, but the great clans definitely won't let you off just because you're soft-hearted. All kinds of schemes, all kinds of despicable means, are endless. I'm only asking you, if you really expose yourself and they still want to deal with you, what will you do? When that time comes, what will you do? Wu Jueqing asked. The main reason I exposed myself is to deal with the extraterrestrial demons. This part must be made clear. If they still treat me as the #1 enemy after I explain the danger, then I will kill them all and completely exterminate the two clans. I won't feel the slightest bit of guilt. Those who still want to fight among themselves at such a time, what's the pity in killing them? Chu Yang smiled lightly. Besides, the great clans aren't the only martial artists in this world. There are countless people outside the great clans, and these people are also a force that cannot be ignored. Chapter 15-16. It's my duty to do so. Chu Yang chuckled and said, Of course, if we still can't turn the tide in the end, what's wrong with perishing together with this continent? That's what I deserve. I'm the Tribulation Sword Master. This is also my responsibility. How can I back down? Mo Qingwu's face was flushed. She looked at Chu Yang, her eyes full of love. Mo Qingwu, who had never felt that the words Tribulation Sword Master were adorable and respectable in her previous life, finally understood something today. At this moment of enlightenment, some of the grudges that still existed in her heart suddenly dissipated like a cool breeze, without a trace or shadow. Mo also held her breath. Dong Wuxiang jumped up and laughed. That's right, this is my boss. What's the big deal about death? As a man, I naturally have to do what I'm supposed to do. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Part 7 Chapter 8-13, 3 Light Formation. If you don't do it because of this or that, then you are a coward. I, Dong Wuxiang, will of course accompany boss and fight until the world turns upside down. Wu Jueqing took a deep breath. Respect flashed across his eyes. He said, Since that's the case, I'm not someone who's afraid of trouble. I can also fight a battle with the extraterrestrial demons in the Heavens continent. It'll be the first battle where I meet my brother again. Chu Yang laughed and said, There's no need to be too pessimistic. Maybe things aren't as serious as we think. Once the pros and cons are clear, several big clans will immediately change sides and work together to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. It's not impossible. In that case, after the extraterrestrial demons are killed, the order of the heavens will be re-established. Destroying the Dharma Supreme and taking over the law enforcement officers will be even more natural. Won't that be great? Everyone laughed bitterly. Everyone knew that Chu Yang was just pretending to be relaxed when he said this. He definitely didn't think so in his heart. If everything in the world was so simple, and everyone was so clear about love and hate, with the interests of the common people as the main premise, then where would there be injustice? That kind of world was too cute, too fascinating for him to imagine. Wu Jueqing was silent for a moment. Then he said, Extraterrestrial demons, extraterrestrial demons. His eyes suddenly shone brightly as he muttered, "Send my brother to battle the extraterrestrial demons in the outer realm. Protect my brother to become an immortal golden body." Extraterrestrial demon. It's all because of the Sky Fiend. He thought of his big brother's sacrifice and the tragic deaths of the past masters of Calamity Sword. Then he thought of Chu Yang's choice. He couldn't help but murmur, "Calamity Sword Master against the heavenly demon." The people from the Li clan retreated into the mountains like the tide. He kept retreating. Under Mo Tianji's command, countless purple lights suddenly flashed. The entire sky seemed to be illuminated by these rising purple lights. Streaks of energy appeared out of nowhere. In an instant, the entire area was filled with mist. More than half of the Li clan's 10,000 years' worth of purple crystals were scattered here by Mo Tianji. Whether or not it was a waste was another matter. In any case, the effect was Ao Shiyun's name. This whole thing was a mess. The Alliance army that was about to give chase was also dazzled by this matter. Fearing that the enemy had some kind of scheme, they uniformly slowed down their speed. In front of them, streaks of purple light shot into the sky. Then, they quickly disappeared and merged into the mountains that had stood tall for hundreds of thousands of years. The power of the previous explosion was shocking. The Alliance army suffered heavy losses, but because the explosion point was too close, the other areas were naturally much less affected. Even so, the area within a radius of a few thousand miles was still affected by the tremors. The area where the purple lights flashed was relatively far from the explosion point. Although much of the snow on the mountains was still shaken off, some of the relatively shallow ravines were completely flattened. Coupled with the thousands of years of accumulated snow, it was really unknown how deep the ravines were. However, although the mountain itself was affected by the tremors, there was no danger of it collapsing. The purpose of these streaks of purple light was unknown. Purely looking at it, it seemed to be used to stabilize the mountain. The moment the purple light entered the mountain, not a single speck of dust fell off the mountain. It stood tall and upright. Could it be that the power of so many purple crystals was used just to stabilize the mountain? Wasn't this too extravagant? This was simply an act of squandering. After the Li clan's men entered the mountains, they collectively disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Diwu Qingrou's men came after them. They were also careful and did not act rashly. After occupying the outermost mountain and setting up camp at the top of the mountain, Diwu Qingrou passed down an order for the entire team to stop moving forward and not act rashly. In some places ahead, there were still streaks of purple light rising continuously, rushing up and disappearing. Diwu Qingrou looked ahead, his face full of heaviness. This is really too extravagant. Previously, it was 100 million purple crystals. This time, the other party has scattered at least 1 billion purple crystals. Xiao Chenyu murmured, "Could it be another array formation? Do they want to perish together with us? If that's really the case, I'm afraid the power is even greater than the previous one." The previous explosion was unprecedentedly powerful. Even this peak-level supreme martial artist was terrified. Now that he saw the purple crystals that were far more powerful than before, it was not surprising that he was a little nervous. 1 billion purple crystals, even any of the 8 superclans could not come up with this amount. Unless they worked together to clear the warehouse, they could only barely come up with it. If this number was purely calculated, it would be enough to pile up 100 mid-level supreme martial artists. But he did not know what psychology the Li clan had to accumulate so many purple crystals. In a battle between wise men of the same level, the same trick will not work twice. I understand this principle, and I believe Mo Tianji understands it too. Diwu Qingrou said, "The purpose of these purple crystals is indeed to set up an array, but not to perish together. Instead, it's to stabilize the terrain so that not a single blade of grass, tree, mountain, or rock can be easily shaken. After this formation is completed, even a mid-grade supreme martial artist wouldn't be able to move a single rock on this mountain with his full strength." "What do you mean?" Yi Xiaoyao was confused. Spending 1 billion purple crystals just to stabilize the structure of the mountains and not destroy it? What is this, isn't this? Yi Xiaoyao did not finish his words, but everyone understood the latter half of his sentence. This was simply the act of a super prodigal. More than 1 billion purple crystals were thrown away just like that. The only purpose was to prevent the mountains from being destroyed. This was simply a way of doing things that made people speechless. If they were thrown into the water, they could still make a sound. What could they do here? Seniors, if you think this way, you are very wrong. Deep fear appeared in Diwu Qingrou's eyes. I mentioned before that this is the main battlefield that Emo Tianji chose. It is also the final battlefield between the enemy and us. Here, mountains are connected, mountains cover mountains. The terrain is extremely complicated. It is precisely such a special geographical environment that made Emo Tianji choose this place. And the scattering of these purple crystals also proves this point. The Li clan has lived in the northwest for many years. This is their most fundamental base camp. I believe that even if the Li clan were to walk with their eyes closed, they would not make a mistake in this mountain range. But we are new here, so we know nothing about this terrain. There are 3 key elements in a decisive battle. The enemy and us have the advantage. If the Li clan wants to fight against us, the only thing they can rely on is the geographical advantage. To be honest, in my original plan at the beginning of the battle, I would gather the strongest experts on our side and work together to destroy the terrain here so that the enemy would no longer be familiar with it. But with Emo Tianji's generosity, these more than 1 billion purple crystals, he completely grasped the geographical advantage in one fell swoop. With this geographical advantage, they can make full use of it. With their weak forces against our strong forces, they can cause damage that is several times more than ours. Although we still have the advantage in this battle, it is already impossible for us to turn our advantage into victory in a short time and easily defeat the Li clan. This is the power of more than 1 billion purple crystals. Diwu Qingru sighed deeply. The ability of a supreme martial artist could move mountains and fill seas. They could also shatter the void. This ability could bring about infinite changes in the established pattern of war. Diwu Qingru indeed intended to send high-level supreme martial artists to wantonly destroy the terrain that the other party relied on the moment they arrived here. As long as 2 supreme martial artists casually fought, each swinging a huge mountain and bombarding it for a while, most of the terrain here would be destroyed. The Li clan, which did not have the geographical advantage, could only choose to fight head-on. In that case, not only would there be no more suspense in this battle, it would also end in a very short time, but what he did not expect was that Emo Tianji had also thought of this step and could even devise such a powerful contingency plan, using more than 1 billion purple crystals to preserve the geographical advantage. Such generosity could no longer be described as simply astonishing. Even if Diwu Qingru were to ask himself, he would not be able to do such a thing. Because even if the 8 super clans and the law enforcement officers joined forces, they would definitely not take out so many purple crystals for him to squander. To use the wealth that could nurture 100 supreme martial artists to fight a battle, or even just to lay the foundation for this battle. This would have been unimaginable in anyone's eyes. However, Emo Tianji had done it without the slightest bit of forewarning. This was truly a great generosity. Diwu Qingrou's face was as calm as ever, as if he had a card up his sleeve. But in his heart, there were many worries. Since Emo Tianji had made such a decision to cut off all means of retreat, that meant that he had 100% confidence in using the geographical advantage to win the battle. He had actually fallen into a passive position again. In the same battle, he had actually been schemed against twice by the enemy and had no way to counterattack at all. Such a feeling made Diwu Qingru feel unusually oppressed. It was as if whatever he wanted to do, the other party had already foreseen it one step ahead of him. This could not go on. If he just let the other party make the moves while he reacts passively, even if he could win this battle, he would have an inner demon. He had to think of a way to counterattack. But where should he counterattack? Looking at the rising purple light in front of him, Diwu Qingru frowned and pondered. What kind of battle formation is this? Why is the effect so amazing? It directly draws on the power of heaven and earth and blends it into the battle formation. It's really frightening. Xiao Chenyu asked. Everyone had the same question in their hearts. This is the Three Lights Great Formation. Chapter 15-17. Diwu Qingru looked at the sky and sighed. Its full name is Three Lights Cosmic Upside-Down Formation. No wonder, I was still wondering why Li Chuanbo would be so unwise to completely disperse the dark clouds that had been in the sky for hundreds of thousands of years before the battle, even at the expense of his own source of life. So it was to complete this formation, so that's why. Xiao Chenyu had a bad feeling. He had contributed half of Li Chuanbo's effort to disperse the dark clouds. In that case, his act of caring for his brother had actually become the true meaning of helping the enemy? Wasn't he being used by the other party without anyone noticing? And the depletion this time would eventually be turned around to deal with him? The moment he thought of this, Xiao Chenyu almost vomited blood. He had shot himself in the foot. If such a thing really happened to him, a mid-level supreme martial artist, then it would be a joke. This Xiao clan ancestor almost gritted his teeth as he asked, "What do you mean?" The so-called Three Lights Universe Reversing Great Formation uses the power of the sun, moon, and stars to transform it into surging spiritual energy that enters the Great Formation. This makes it so that the place where the Great Formation is located will not move at all for 10,000 years. Of course, as this is the northwest where the sun, moon, and stars can't be seen all year round, the method of using manpower to disperse the dark clouds in the sky definitely won't last long. I believe that not long after, the dark clouds will definitely cover the northwest once again, and the power of the three lights will be cut off. This formation can only be maintained for another 3 years at most before it will be destroyed. Diwu Qingru sighed. But the result of this formation participating in this battle is already irreversible. I believe that if both parties are willing to fight, everything can be decided within a few days, definitely not 3 years. Then, that day Xiao Chenyu was dumbfounded. Oh, Elder's idea has already come true. Previously, Li Chuanbo's method of using up his life energy could only achieve half of the effect at most. If he were to set up the formation, I believe that the amount of purple crystals used wouldn't exceed 500 million, and the area covered by the formation would definitely be reduced sharply. If that was the case, we might still have a chance. But Elder Xiao, once you interfered in consideration of our old friendship, the blue sky became clear. The power of the three lights of the sun, moon, and stars shone down without reservation. It can be considered as completely helping the enemy. Diwu Qingru sighed and said, "Now that the formation has been completed, it's futile to say anything else." And just as Diwu Qingru was explaining to the Alliance army, the purple crystals on the ground no longer shone. Then the sky seemed to respond to something, and a blazing white light fell from the blazing sun in the sky. The sun of the purple cheese of the sun son of the sun son of sun, instantly, an abnormally hot aura burst. That enormous heat was hot enough to melt gold and stone. Diwu Qingru and the others were standing far away, but they could still feel that kind of heat that could burn pig iron. However, even the snow on the ground did not show any signs of melting under the blazing white sun. Then, from the opposite direction, an extremely cold white light slowly descended and intertwined with the blazing white light. It was the Qinghua moonlight. It was as if two gods with unparalleled power were fighting in the sky, one man and one sword fiercely clashing against each other. In another moment, the sky was filled with spots of light again. Countless spots of light quickly filled the entire sky in the distance. Countless rays of cold starlight, like stars in a chessboard, gradually fell down densely and landed on the ground. The cold starlight was as thin as hair, but there were billions, tens of billions of rays. They had already covered the entire ground, not letting go of a single blade of grass, tree, stone, snow, ice, or dust. A soundless feeling of rupture suddenly arose. Then, the three lights disappeared completely in a trance. An 8th grade supreme martial artist didn't believe it and tried to pick up a fist-sized stone beside his feet. However, this 8th grade supreme martial artist used all his strength and still couldn't pick up the stone. Everyone woke up from their daze and went to do the experiment personally, but the result was the same. The only thing that could be picked up was the snow on the ground. However, the stones attached to the ground couldn't even be picked up, the finger-sized ones. Everything became one with the everlasting heaven and earth. This was the true meaning of being impregnable. Seeing all this happening right before his eyes, and thinking of what Diwu Qingru had said just now, Xiao Qinyu's old face turned purple at once. Under the combination of shame and anger, a strong feeling of being unable to show one's face rose. He panted heavily and his eyes turned red. I, Xiao Qinyu, actually used all my strength to help the enemy during the final battle? To deal with me and the team that I lead? This is the biggest joke in the world. Elder Xiao, please calm down. I think this is probably Mo Tianji's scheme and may not necessarily have anything to do with Li Chuanbua. I even suspect that Li Chuanbua may not even know that he, too, had been set up by Mo Tianji that night. Diwu Qingru said indifferently. Mo Tianji asked people to prepare a sufficient amount of purple crystals right from the start. Obviously, he had thought of this long ago. He even knew beforehand that at that time, Elder Xiao would definitely think that Elder Li's intentions were just to motivate the clansmen. And with Elder Xiao and Elder Li's 10,000 years of brotherhood, when Elder Li was in such despair, even willing to sacrifice his own life to fight under the sky, he would definitely help. So, he deliberately planned all of this. Diwu Qingru sighed and said, Mo Tianji's ability to calculate people's thoughts is really terrifying. Everything is within Mo Tianji's calculations, including the possible reactions on our side. This Mo Tianji really lives up to his reputation as the master of calculation and manipulation. He's really amazing. It would have been better if he didn't say anything. Now that he said this, Xiao Qinyu, this old man, was even more ashamed. He was the dignified clan master of the Xiao clan, one of the few experts of the current generation, an old man who had lived for more than 10,000 years, but he was actually completely calculated by the other party and used as a tool. Moreover, this person was only a young boy in his teens or 20s. How could he endure this? Xiao Qinyu's eyes turned red. His clothes started to flutter even though there was no wind. His long hair also stood up. His eyes opened wide as he roared, Emonji, you're a junior. You've gone too far. This old man and you can't live under the same sky. Elder Xiao, please calm down. Diwu Qingru's eyes flickered as he said, if you think deeper, the enemy may be using this method to make you angry and lose your mind. You're the commander-in-chief of our army. If you let your emotions affect your decisions because of anger, they'll get more opportunities to strike back. In fact, Diwu Qingru didn't care whether the enemy had an opportunity to take advantage of him or not. But Xiao Qinyu was furious at this moment. When a supreme martial artist of this level was angry, it was really hard to estimate how much his battle strength would increase. Moreover, after his anger rose, that last bit of friendship would no longer be a hindrance to Xiao Qinyu. This was what Diwu Qingru wanted to see. Turning passivity into initiative, turning weakness into motivation. This was Diwu Qingru's method. When a wise man was at a disadvantage, he would use the most effective counterattack. Mo Tianji has triggered the celestial phenomenon and the 3 lights of the sun, moon, and stars have risen. It looks like the decisive battle is about to officially start. Diwu Qingru took a deep breath, but his expression was unusually calm. So what if I let you have the geographical advantage? I still have manpower. Manpower is the most important thing on the battlefield, especially in an army made up of super strong martial artists who have the ability to move mountains and seas. I'd like to see what other treasures you have that can make up for this fundamental gap. If you can't make up for this gap in real strength, even if you have all kinds of other methods, you won't be able to change the final outcome. From this moment on, let you and I have a real battle. After a while, I can only command from the sky. Diwu Qingru said indifferently, Elder Lan and this senior from the law enforcement team, I'll have to trouble the two of you to help me command from the sky later. Lan Mafeng and the middle-grade supreme martial artist from the law enforcement team agreed at the same time. Faced with such a messy mountain range, even if one stood at the peak of the mountain, it would be difficult to see everything clearly. It was only by standing high up in the sky that one could really see 1,000 miles. Prepare for battle, Diwu Qingru ordered softly. These two words were filled with the most bloody taste. Everyone's heart trembled. Was it finally going to start? On the opposite side, Xiao Chenyu would never have thought that his righteous help back then would actually bring his own team into a predicament where they couldn't advance or retreat. Li Xiangxi laughed loudly, very pleased. Xiao Chenyu's expression must be very good now. It's a pity that we can't see it. If only we could see it, then it would be perfect. Li Chuanbo frowned. What did you say? How impudent. Li Xiangxi shrank back. Yes, it's second Uncle Xiao. Li Xiangxi's age was actually already more than 10,000 years old, but he still feared his father's reprimand from the bottom of his heart. It was a kind of fear that originated from a father's nature. After all, there were very few people in this world who weren't afraid of aging. Li Chuanbo said indifferently, no matter how hostile we are, the order of seniority must not be abolished. In today's situation, you can kill your second uncle with your own hands, or your second uncle will kill you with his own hands. This is understandable. On the battlefield, there's no such thing as kinship. But no matter what, you can't spout nonsense in terms of words and attitude. Is your second uncle's name something that you can call him directly to his face? Yes, father's reprimand is right. I'll remember it. Li Xiangxi was sweating profusely. Li Chuanbo snorted. All these years, I've been in seclusion all year round, and the entire clan has been managed by you. Now that things have come to this, you still have the cheek to mock others? Don't you feel embarrassed? Li Xiangxi's face was ashen, and he kept silent. Chapter 1520. There was only one thing that was certain. Diwu Qingru sent out these two teams mainly to test the waters. However, Mo Tianji sent out these two teams with a premeditated plan. Diwu Qingru watched the two teams enter the battle zone from high up in the sky. His face was calm and his mind entered an extremely detached state. No matter what the other party did, he could react immediately. This time, I won't give Mo Tianji the slightest chance to pull any tricks. From where he was, he could also see the traces of the Li clan team entering the battle zone. Both teams were moving forward at an extremely fast speed. They set off towards the place of life and death without hesitation. Although the distance was far, the people fighting on both sides were all experts of the world. Their speed was more than 1,000 times faster than ordinary people. The distance between the two sides was actually only 500 miles. The distance of a few hundred miles was about to collide with each other in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. However, Diwu Qingru firmly believed that Mo Tianji would not let the two sides fight openly. A head-on collision was equivalent to courting death. It was not something a wise man would do. What would this wise man do next? Diwu Qingru was not Mo Tianji. Naturally, he did not know what Mo Tianji would do. Therefore, he chose to wait. Wait for Mo Tianji's change. He would deal with it by remaining unchanged. In midair, Mo Tianji suddenly let out a long howl. Diwu Qingru looked over. The Li clan team had already entered a canyon where they were about to come into contact with the enemy. This canyon was quite long. Moreover, it faced the mountain peak on the Alliance's side. It was like a natural barrier. It actually completely blocked Diwu Qingru's line of sight. At this moment, the Alliance's team was only a few hundred feet away from the other side of the mountain peak. Diwu Qingru made a prompt decision and ordered, "Stop." The Alliance's men stopped in their tracks. Each of them quickly found rocks to cover themselves. These rocks that could be shattered with one slap were now a solid barrier that no one could destroy. This was also the main reason why Diwu Qingru was not worried that the terrain would give the enemy an advantage. You, Mo Tianji, created the terrain. We can also make use of it. You are not the only ones who will benefit. If low-level and high-level martial artists were to hold the same shield, the ones who would benefit the most would still be the high-level martial artists. It was as Diwu Qingru had expected. After the Li clan's men entered the canyon, they disappeared without a trace. It was as if a drop of water had melted into the sea, completely silent. Commander-in-Chief Diwu is indeed a master strategist. The other party has indeed stopped at that position. Lan Mofeng was sincerely convinced. Strategizing could determine the outcome of a battle from 1,000 miles away. This is not something that is hard to predict. Among all the mountains between the two sides, only that mountain ridge is the highest. Moreover, there are no openings to the left and right. Most importantly, that is the only place that can block my line of sight. No matter how high we are, we will not be able to see the situation clearly due to the distance. If we are any lower, we will not even be able to see our side clearly. Diwu Qingru insipidly said, therefore, that mountain ridge is the watershed. Emotianji did not hesitate to spend more than 1 billion purple crystals to activate the power of the 3 lights of the sun, moon, and stars to maintain the terrain. This was so that this command would not be wasted. Therefore, that mountain ridge is extremely heavy. Pass down the order. If the other party does not move, we will not move either. Emotianji hopes that we will take the initiative to attack, cross this mountain ridge, and fall into their trap and be at his mercy. But how can I do as he wishes? The order was passed down. In an instant, the battlefield was plunged into dead silence. There was not even a shadow on this side. No one knew where the Li clan's men had hidden themselves. On the other side, the experts of the allied forces were all holed up in the snow, not moving at all behind the rocks. It seemed like they did not even dare to breathe loudly. Emotianji smiled slightly and actually landed back very straightforwardly. He landed on the top of the mountain to rest. Almost at the same time that he moved, Diwu Qingru also landed back. The two of them let out a long laugh, having a tacit understanding. In this battle, firstly, it was to see who could not keep their cool first. Secondly, it was time to start another scheme. Diwu Qingru would definitely not continue to wait so foolishly, and neither would Emotianji. However, in the instant that the two of them landed, another 2 teams from the allied forces took advantage of the brief moment when Emotianji was not in the air to quietly rush past from the left and right. On the vast snowy plains, the 2 teams of martial artists in white robes. They were like 2 snow dragons rushing past at high speed. This move was Diwu Qingru's probing move. No matter what choice Emotianji made, with this move as the foundation, he could attack or retreat. If Emotianji did not make a move, the second batch of people would join the first batch of people and launch a large-scale attack. They would definitely be able to destroy the first batch of people from the Li clan easily. If Emotianji had already planned and sent people to assist, the second batch of people could also help defend the first batch of people. At least, it would ensure that they would not be wiped out in one fell swoop. However, how could Emotianji not think of what Diwu Qingru thought of? In fact, he would even think of things that Diwu Qingru would not think of. At the same time, from the Li clan side, 2 teams of people also attacked from both sides. The direction of their advance was actually the opposite direction of the 2 opposing teams. They set off almost at the same time, and their speed was also about the same. The current situation was very delicate. If the second batch of people from the allied forces went around first, then the first 2 teams from the Li clan would be trapped in a terrible situation of being attacked from all sides. At that time, no matter how powerful the ambush was, Diwu Qingru would choose to launch a direct attack. Once the opportunity was gone, they could only take it down first. If the 4 teams happened to meet, then what awaited the Li clan would still be a one-sided situation because of the difference in strength between the 2 sides. At this moment, Diwu Qingru and Emotianji's expressions were especially solemn. The official start of the decisive battle. The first confrontation had begun. After confirming that the second batch of people was halfway through their journey, Diwu Qingru waved his hand and 2 more teams silently surrounded them. The third batch of people started to move. They formed a pincer attack. On the Li clan side, Mo Tianji did not make any move this time. Only the 4 teams at the very beginning remained motionless like a mountain. The rest of the teams were extremely calm. Mo Tianji rose up again and floated in midair with Chu Lu still standing at his original position. This time, he held a few incomplete versions of heavy pills in his hand. It looked like he did not plan to continue until the battle was over. Today could be said to be Mo Tianji's day of extravagance. He spent so much money that he even had to use incomplete versions of heavy pills to recover his cultivation. What kind of wasteful behavior was this? The previous 100 million purple crystals, more than 1 billion purple crystals, and the vast 3 lights were ultimately just external resources. However, those incomplete versions of heavy pills were directly life-saving elixirs that could save almost any kind of injury. More than 1 billion purple crystals were enough to create 100 low-grade supreme martial artists. That was just a statistical statement. The actual situation might not be so. However, the incomplete version of the heavy pill was a super elixir that could truly save a low-grade supreme martial artist from dying injuries. Today, this elixir was used to restore Mo Tianji's depleted cultivation so that he could stay afloat for a long period of time. This could no longer be described as extravagant. On the opposite side, Diwu Qingru also rose into the air at almost the same time. If one did not know better, they would definitely think that the two of them had discussed this beforehand. Just as Mo Tianji rose into the air, a sudden change occurred. Just like that, the 2 groups of people from the Li clan disappeared into the vast snowfield in an extremely neat and abrupt manner. Just like the previous 2 groups of people, they disappeared without a trace. The people from the Li clan on the mountaintop also disappeared without a trace in an instant. They had completely disappeared. They had completely disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had really discussed this beforehand. On the other side, under Diwu Qingru's instructions, the 4 teams that had been sent out later also disappeared. The only traces that could be found were those of the previous 2 teams. They were still quietly lying on the surface of the snow. Those white robes lying on the snow were no easier to find than disappearing. The other 4 teams all silently dived into the snow. There was no such thing as disappearing without a trace in this world. It was just that the key to the so-called disappearing had not been seen through. The so-called disappearing of the 2 teams was nothing more than diving into the snow. The 3 lights' great formation could indeed fix the rocks and plants in place and even turn them into substances that even peerless experts could not move. However, it could not fix the snow. The 4 teams, totaling more than 3,000 people, disappeared neatly under the snow. Obviously, they were preparing an ambush. The original snow on this terrain was already thousands of feet deep. After the earthquake and avalanche, it was even thicker. More than 3,000 people passed through the snow without any difficulty. Just looking at the surface of the snow, there was really no movement at all. Diwu Qingru watched quietly. The people on Mo Tianji's side had disappeared. They must have also hidden in the snow. Mo Tianji's arrangement should be just like that. But now, his own people had also gone down. The Li clan is known as the Icy Snow Clan and is naturally very familiar with hiding and fighting in the snow. However, the people on our side are not incompetent either. Most importantly, whether it is in terms of numbers or cultivation, our side is far superior. Even if we fight under the snow and are unfamiliar with the battle environment, we can still rely on our great strength to forcefully crush them. It is definitely foolproof. However, Diwu Qingru immediately discovered something strange. Although the opposite side still had the same arrangement and the flag was still erected, it seemed like something was missing. What exactly is missing? Diwu Qingru looked over. Because the distance was really too far, the flag on the opposite side was already as small as the eye of a needle. He couldn't help but ponder. However, he couldn't figure it out. Chapter 1521. Upon hearing that, Lan Mofeng also focused his vision and looked over. Similarly, he didn't find anything. He said doubtfully, "Nothing is missing." "Commander Diwu, what exactly are you looking for?" Diwu Qingru didn't answer. He focused on observing and sensing with his heart. After a while, he finally smiled. So that's how it is. It actually lacks some human presence. Humans can be emboldened and also intimidating. I didn't find anything at all. However, the enemy's base camp has clearly become an empty city. Where are they? Where exactly did they go? If they weren't under the snow, could they have flown? Even if they really flew collectively, there should be a shadow, right? Also, did the first two teams that Mo Tianji sent out just give up like that? Previously, Diwu Qingru had set up on the ground. Although he had sent out 4 teams and reckoned that the enemy would definitely have corresponding arrangements, he didn't see it with his own eyes after all. Now that he saw such a strange situation, his first guess was, did the enemy retreat in full? If all of them had retreated, then it was indeed impossible to send anyone else. Therefore, he thought it was those 2 teams. However, Diwu Qingru didn't let his guard down just because of that. He ordered, all troops on guard. Don't act rashly. Mo Tianji spending billions of purple crystals is definitely not just a feint. If we miss out on today's terrain and opportunity, even if Mo Tianji wants to fight another battle and set up such a formation again in the future, he won't have such an opportunity anymore. This place must be the main battlefield without a doubt. Since Mo Tianji wants to compete with us in terms of patience, then let's compete. Let's see who loses their cool first. Diwu Qingru's eyes shone brightly. Tell Elder Xiao that I'm asking him not to act rashly. The Alliance army didn't move, and the entire Li clan was missing. The so-called final battle actually ended abruptly and didn't really start all this while. It was obvious that both sides were competing in terms of patience. Whoever lost their cool first would be at a disadvantage. Diwu Qingru waved his hand and Lan Mofeng instantly gave the order. The 2 teams that were originally crouching in the snow quickly floated up to the top of the mountain like white smoke. They looked down at the canyon from above, paying attention to any sign of movement. Everyone unsheathed their weapons as if they were facing a great enemy. Not to say that they were jittery, but it was more or less the same. However, even when they occupied the commanding heights of the mountain top, the fear of being attacked didn't happen at all. They actually managed to occupy this crucial vantage point without any risk. Below, it was still a vast expanse of flat land without any movement. However, everyone knew that their own team of more than 3,000 people was below the layer of snow. And the other side's troops were also hiding in the same layer of snow. However, why wasn't there any movement from this layer of snow that was neither too big nor too small? He believed that any random person would be able to flip this entire place over, right? Mo Tianji stood high up in the sky and looked down with a smile. He looked very confident. Chu was a little confused. Big brother Mo, I really don't understand what you're up to this time. Mo Tianji chuckled, I can't say. Who cares? Chu turned her head and pouted. Mo Tianji's heart softened. He said telepathically, actually, if you think about it carefully, you'll understand why. Everyone can change their tricks. It's just that each trick is ingenious and different. Chu frowned and thought hard. She thought about all the causes and effects but still came up with nothing. She could only look at Mo Tianji with dissatisfaction, obviously waiting for him to explain. Mo Tianji smiled bitterly. He wanted to help but couldn't. He couldn't explain at this time. They were really too close to the enemy now. A mid-level supreme martial artist might be able to intercept his telepathic message. Mo Tianji couldn't take this risk. Even though Wu Jueqing's move made Mo Tianji not worry about his own safety, he could at least keep an eye on you instead of attacking you, right? Apart from his calm expression, Mo Tianji couldn't help but admire him a little. At this moment he felt the same as Diwu Qingru. He had punched empty air. Diwu Qingru chose to deal with the myriad of changes by remaining unchanged. He completely ignored the various facades that Mo Tianji had put up. From beginning to end, he bided his time and remained motionless like a mountain. He completely guarded his vital points. This move also gave Mo Tianji an endless headache. Originally, Mo Tianji's plan was that if Diwu Qingru fell for it and directly sent people over, then he could make use of his best moves to withdraw his people and exchange places with the enemy. The place that Mo Tianji had set up as the center of the battle here, the place where he could unleash the greatest power, wasn't where he was but where Diwu Qingru was. Think about it. If they set up camp here and then suddenly gave up, how could the enemy not come over to check if they sensed something was wrong? Once they discovered an empty city here, their first reaction would be, the enemy has escaped. Especially under such circumstances, it was absolutely reasonable for the Li clan to make a collective retreat in order to prolong their feeble existence. Then, all their attention would naturally be focused on the deeper areas. The people over there would smoothly move over and occupy the enemy's main camp. This could be said to be a huge strategic advantage. But if they accidentally discovered that the enemy didn't escape at all at this time, but instead slipped over to their side and attacked their base, how could they not turn around and counterattack? But as long as they turned around and counterattacked, they would fall into Mo Tianji's great trap. At that time, Snow's ambush and all kinds of formations would be fully activated. Mo Tianji was very confident that he could make the enemy's 8th grade supreme martial artists lose their lives in such a trap. But the problem now is, you have planned everything to be comfortable, but the other party is not acting according to your script at all. You hope to make him smarter, but he is as dumb as a pig and doesn't move at all. In terms of chess, it was like Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru were playing a life and death game. Mo Tianji let Diwu Qingru taste my anger first, then Mo Tianji let Diwu Qingru taste your anger, and then Mo Tianji set up a dragon-slaying trap. As long as Diwu Qingru came over, Mo Tianji's dragon would definitely be slain. But Diwu Qingru didn't react at all. No matter how tempting you are, I have a rule that I won't go over. You can do whatever you want. This move of Diwu Qingru's was really very troublesome. What should he do? Mo Tianji naturally understood that Diwu Qingru was definitely not a pig. He probably did this because he had seen through half of his plan. But the problem was that both of them were at their wits' end. A mistake. In this world, the pros outweigh the cons or the cons outweigh the pros. There really isn't anything that is completely beneficial. Mo Tianji sighed. All of this, including stabilizing the mountain, shouldn't have happened. But if the mountain wasn't stabilized beforehand, the enemy would have already destroyed this place. Now that the mountain is stabilized, the enemy also smoothly believes that this is the location of the final battle. Instead, it made the enemy suspicious. How can we resolve the current predicament? Mo Tianji frowned. They were in a dilemma now. On the other side, Diwu Qingru also frowned. He thought of the same problem as Mo Tianji. How can we resolve the current predicament? Both sides were in a dilemma now. The other side was facing a huge problem. No one dared to make the first move. And Diwu Qingru knew that Mo Tianji definitely had a backup plan. He could only react to it. Once he took the initiative to attack, he would definitely have to pay a considerable price. So the initiative was mostly in the hands of the enemy. So if Mo Tianji didn't make a move, he wouldn't make the first move. And this was precisely what Mo Tianji was most uncomfortable about. If you don't make a move, how can I proceed to the next step? Both sides are actually in a deadlock. On the mountain in the north, Great Sword Master Chu clicked his tongue in wonder. This is the first time I've seen Mo Tianji in such a dilemma. The more he looked at the situation, the more he wanted to laugh. Mo Qingwu was also frowning. Now both sides are waiting for the other to make the first move. But no one dares to make the first move. Second brother has clearly made some mistakes here. But it doesn't become his mistake. If he didn't do those things, I'm afraid this battle would have already ended. But the current situation is truly unbearable. To be honest, Mo Tianji has already done too well so far. The fundamental reason is that the Li clan is too weak. Wu Jucheng said fairly. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.